Is trust just a facade? This thought tormented me the day I discovered the truth about Carrie. "Carrie, what's this?" I demanded, carrying an unwritten love note in my palm. "Ryan, you need to understand." Fell flat on her betrayal. "I didn't expect you to find out." She stammered, her voice quavering with fear and regret, her gaze still avoiding mine. "Don't get mad. I can explain anything," she continued, attempting to cushion the blow with words that could not conceal the gravity of her deeds. Her failed promises resonated in my mind. Here's my tale. Enjoy viewing it. Some feel that our life paths are formed by our decisions, moment to moment. Ryan Gilchrist found himself on an unexpected path after making a small decision. Perhaps that's how life works. Who can say Ryan was converting a garage into a bedroom for a client? Ryan's efforts impressed the owner to the point where he told a buddy about it. This friend, who wanted his kitchen rebuilt as an anniversary gift, phoned while Ryan was present. Ryan needed the job and agreed to meet him about noon. The friend's residence was on the opposite side of town. The quickest route there was near Ryan's residence. Ryan had no intention of stopping until a scarlet automobile cut him off. Ryan swerved into a turn lane to avoid a collision, and he was forced to continue that direction. It turned out to be easier to pass by his house and then take a huge route going east to west than to try to get back on his original course through the bustling lunchtime traffic. Ryan was not bothered. He reasoned that taking his laptop, which contained spreadsheets and a 3D design tool, would be beneficial for the prospective client appointment. He could use it to determine a fair pricing and provide a nice 3D rendering of how the kitchen will appear once completed. Sure, he could have done without it. He knew his price and could have sketched something by hand, but taking the laptop from home was such a little decision that it changed his life so dramatically. Ryan drove up to his house and was astonished to see his wife Carrie's automobile there. She normally worked in the downtown bank and had to work half days on Saturdays. Today was not her day off. He had no idea why she was home, which frightened him. He walked quickly to the kitchen door. When he opened the door, there was no squeak because he had ensured that everything in the house worked well. He disliked when things broke. When he entered the house, he didn't make a sound, therefore he didn't have to worry about noise. The two people he saw would not have heard him. They were too preoccupied with one another. When Ryan saw them, he came to a complete stop. He never expected to see his wife with another man. Particularly not like this. Carrie was with a man who touched her in ways that made Ryan's heart stop. She was partly naked, and it was obvious they were doing things that should only happen between him and Carrie. Her garments were discarded, and the man's hands were in inappropriate areas. Carrie also seemed to be touching the man. Ryan was taken aback by what he saw, which he had never expected. Carrie was partly nude, implying that more was to come. "Oh, Carrie," the man moaned, "I've been waiting a long time for this. No teasing." "Okay." His voice became whiny near the end. Carrie burst out laughing with glee. "Really, Marshall?" she teased. She caressed his chest and pressed her hips against it. "Was it worth the wait?" she whispered in a flirtatious tone. Ryan saw red. He did not think. He simply reacted. He was stunned for a second. The following moment, he was going quickly. He passed through the kitchen and into the living room. He firmly planted his left foot on the carpet before swinging his right in a sharp curve into the man's lower half. Marshall felt something just before, either the sound of Ryan's shoes or his unconsciously moving shadow. Marshall went closer to Carrie, hoping to avoid danger, but he really put Carrie in risk. She may not have been hit if he hadn't moved. Ryan's big boot with a strong toe struck the man's private parts hard, propelling him forward and upward. Ryan was strong and had moved slightly to gain extra force. Only the hard part of the boot struck Carrie, but it was sufficient. Pain rushed through them, making it difficult to breathe or scream. They hit the sofa and held on for a moment. Ryan pushed his foot back down and prepared to strike again. His normally gentle visage was suddenly contorted in wrath. He moved deeper into the room, going closer to the two who had been taken off guard. He had intended to inflict more pain on the man in front of him, but it became evident that no further action was required. Marshall, a man Ryan didn't know, began screaming in a high voice that filled the room. Carrie's screams became even louder a moment after they both tumbled to the floor, rolling in agony. The suffering was too great, like the worst type of pain anyone could imagine. Marshall and Carrie were in their own worlds of pain, only able to scream so loudly that their voices nearly cracked. Ryan stood back, watching the two twist on the floor as cries filled his ears. He noticed his wife's chest swaying violently as her body shook. Her lower body was halfway covered. He could see her hands bound against her. The other man's part was still outstanding, still standing, as if she is still ready for Carrie. Ryan felt ill at the sight, but there was something more wrong. He looked down, surprised to see how thrilled he was. It was the last thing he wanted, making him feel extremely humiliated. His rage quickly changed to shame. He was shocked. His body was working against him. He couldn't get turned on by witnessing his wife with another man. That wasn't him. His shouts, laced with fury and shame, joined the other two's pained moans long after it had occurred. Ryan realized he'd been fighting the impulse to use the Glock Model 21 in its holder. He occasionally pats himself on the back for not pulling it out. Back then, every fiber of his being begged him to use it to take the lives of the two people who had humiliated him. He occasionally wondered if he should have spared a bullet for himself to wash away his own shame. The gun has 13 bullets ready, with one more in the slot. 14.45 ACP rounds would have done the trick. The prospect of violence did not frighten him then, and it does not bother him now. Ryan Lincoln Gilchrist was raised by his grandfather after his parents were killed in a car accident when he was just 7 years old. His mother's father was half Comanche, and he was close to Ryan's great-great-grandfather, who had been a warrior in the 1800s. This ancestor had fought numerous wars, riding out from the Llano Estacado, West Texas's vast flatlands. He died fending off those sent to punish his people for their attacks. Grandpa took young Ryan camping on those plateaus frequently. He showed him secret locations that only warriors knew about, places where others were afraid to go. The harshness of those highlands stayed with Ryan. He enjoyed the silence and the biting air. It spoke to something deep within him, and he frequently yearned to return up there. Life was simple, just him, nature, and the urge to survive. The desire to finish out those two who had deceived him did not unsettle him. He even felt sad for a long about not doing it, but that feeling passed. It's the 21st century, after all. Things like that can no longer be done. He had a major problem. It was even worse than he expected. Finding out Carrie was unfaithful rocked him to his core. He was troubled by pictures of her with another man, but not only that. Yes, those were terrible images for any male to see. What also shocked him was how his own body reacted. Seeing his wife get set to be with another man aroused him. This made him feel little, less like a man, and he despised himself for it. The concept even made him consider suicide. After a difficult 6 weeks, finally he found a therapist who was willing to help him. 2 other therapists were turned off by the despair in his eyes. However, Dr. Christopher was not like the others. In his 70s, he was not easily scared. He was a godsend. The doctor emphasized that it was a fundamental, deeply ingrained response in all male animals, including humans. There is an instinct that ensures they propagate their genes. It was all about preserving the species, according to the doctor. This was connected to a competition to ensure that one's genes were passed on. Some scientists believe that the form of a man's portion evolved to remove another man's DNA from a woman to make room for his own. The doctor said that the design, with a larger tip and a narrower midsection, could aid in pushing out what was already present and taking its place. Dr. Christopher explained why he responded as he did when he saw his wife and that man. It was all about deep, primal instincts. Ryan was a kind man, according to the doctor, but deep-seated desires may take over. When Ryan saw something shocking, an old part of him responded. He realized it wasn't likely to happen again. Knowing would help him maintain control. Much of what he discovered was more than Ryan desired to know. He was fine understanding that it was an old, deep reaction. Everything else was extra. He assured the doctor that it wouldn't happen again. Ever. Dr. Christopher was concerned when he saw Ryan's forceful demeanor. It had been a rough 4 years. Ryan and Carrie stayed together just barely. Ryan couldn't stop thinking about how he'd reacted for a while. When he refocused his attention, he noticed Carrie working hard to demonstrate her desire for their marriage to succeed. She was very kind, respectful, and admired him greatly, and she expressed love in a variety of ways. She worked hard at all times to keep him. She was sorry, and Ryan could tell he was upset about the lies and infidelity, but she definitely felt horrible. Over time, he stopped considering leaving her. They even had a brief split before reconciling when Carrie discovered him and asked him to return home. They spent almost a year in couples therapy trying to mend their marriage. However, even after therapy, they were able to identify issues in their relationship. However, their love lives were never the same. The casual fun improved slightly once they spoke with a helper, but the unique way they expressed love did not return. It took Carrie a year and a half to notice. Ryan did not want to touch her right breast, which he had seen another man touch. She soon realized why. Then she realized he didn't enjoy her touching him much either. This led to more conversations about how to help both jointly and alone. Things in bed improved after a while, but something deep within their bond fractured and never recovered. Carrie stated that they needed a new home because Ryan no longer enjoyed the old one. There were too many negative memories in there. Ryan would glance at places in the previous house and recall horrible memories. It was evident that he would never feel pleased returning home again. They discovered a new 2-story house with 4 rooms in a good neighborhood. It was too large for 2 people, and cleaning it was difficult. They figured they'd need the space one day. They considered having children for a while, but Carrie didn't really want them. "Not now," she replied. Conversations regarding children faded with time. They had considered it shortly after their wedding. However, Carrie had career goals. Children didn't fit in after she stopped talking about it. Ryan assumed he'd never bring it up again. The decision left him feeling hollow, and he wasn't sure what to do about it. Ryan eventually got over his extreme hatred and hurt from his wife's lying and adultery. He had to remind himself that he and Carrie were not strangers to love when they married. It wasn't easy, but he forced himself to think about the man Carrie was with, just like the others before they met. Things improved slightly, but not to their previous state. Something was lost in their link, something difficult to identify. But he felt its absence. They never truly discussed Carrie's cheating. Even with the assistance of their counselors, neither Ryan nor Carrie wanted to look into that story. Perhaps they should have. Ryan was unsure. Ryan turned 33 in July and sometimes felt older than his age. Today was such a day. By March, he noticed a little of gray in his hair, which surprised him for a while. Carrie simply gave it a shoulder. It made him appear intelligent, she said. Ryan watched her leave carelessly. That's how young people talk about older men. It felt like the conclusion of the chase, and I was scared about what it could signify. He brought it up several weeks later. She assured him that he didn't need to worry. After all, he was married and had left the chase. It made him feel slightly better. Not much, but a little. But he didn't feel good about it now. He had accepted the gray, but by late April, he had developed new concerns. He wasn't sure he'd be married much longer, despite Carrie's kindness and love. Ryan's perspective and emotions have shifted since she learned about the other man. He didn't snap the first time she instigated an unnecessary fight, the first time she nagged him without cause, or the first time she appeared frigid for no apparent reason. He didn't get upset the first or second time he discovered she wasn't where she claimed to be. But after several similar incidents, he had a gut feeling about what was going on. It quickly became evident that all of the clues were present. Now there are signs that she was seeing someone else. They began to show up 3 months ago, shortly after Carrie received a significant career promotion. It was hardly a complete shock. He was scared it would happen again, so he trained himself to seek for the slightest hint of a shift in her behavior. He had read a large number of books during the last 4 years, the most of which he had purchased with cash from various old bookstores. Some were delivered by mental health professionals, while others were delivered by skilled advisors without a fancy title. These literature delves deeply into the mentality of a partner who wanders off and discusses ways to overcome being cheated on. However, he found detective books to be the most compelling and useful. These books provide advice on how to recognize a cheater. They outlined warning signals that a suspicious spouse should look out for. Some people cited more than 100 symptoms that a wife or husband is messing around. One book by a detective and a therapist together was quite informative. Other books focused on how to watch. Some even referred to it as spying on a partner who was suspected of cheating. He now owned a sizable collection of these books. He kept them in a storage area in the garage where Carrie never went. The cobwebs in that area of the garage, as well as the stack of unclean, oily rags in front of the garbage, kept her away. She made me feel uneasy. He had returned to many of these novels whenever she came close to it recently. Ryan sensed something was wrong. He observed minor fights over trivial matters, as well as his wife's callous disregard. Worried, he put a tiny voice-activated tape recorder under the seat of her 2-year-old automobile when he picked it up early one Sunday with his wife still in bed. What he discovered didn't surprise him. He overheard 2 conversations in the car with her friends, as well as several phone calls from Carrie, all concerning a guy named Shawn. The final conversation on the tape, which was not entirely recorded because the tape ended, made it plain that they were referring about Shawn Michaels, her supervisor at the major city bank. This didn't hit Ryan too hard. Carrie had already cheated with a coworker called Marshall at another bank. They became close after sharing lunches, and during slow moments, it was easy to detect Carrie cheating on Ryan with another supervisor. Ryan noticed obvious evidence that she was cheating once he began paying attention. Carrie believed she was being clever, just as in the book, but Ryan understood almost immediately. Having gone through this with Carrie before helped him catch on quickly, but always a little behind. Knowing for certain, he began to withdraw from each lie he discovered that pained him, as he allowed the pain of her betrayal to erode his feelings for Carrie. He intended it to be painful. He intended to cease caring for her as soon as possible, and it worked even faster than he had anticipated. Carrie's adultery gradually eroded his love for her to the point where he had no feelings for her, even at night when he was alone. He knew he was prepared. "Hey, looks good. Do you want a booth or a table?" The woman's cheerful voice brought Ryan back to the present moment. His thoughts had drifted away as he stood waiting to be seated. These days, his mind was frequently elsewhere. He disliked feeling out of control like this. "Oh, anything is good," he responded without caring where he sat. "Maybe somewhere where I can glance outside while still being quiet." "I get it," the short, round waitress replied with a wide smile. "Follow me. This route." Ryan followed her to a booth at the rear wall, away from the raucous crowd and behind a half-high wall. "Do you want some coffee, dear?" she inquired as Ryan pushed his towering frame into the narrow area between the table and the fixed seat. It was a squeeze for a huge guy, but once seated, the table was ideal for dining or working on his laptop. Ryan described it as all black, hot, and a lot of it. The waitress grinned. They did not serve sophisticated coffee here, and she was relieved not to be asked for it. I'm not sure why any male would desire such fancy drinks. She liked this guy as she filled the coffee pitcher on the counter. She looked over at the large man who had begun coming in every morning and evening since last Thursday. He ran a modest firm that conducted minor repairs, made rooms appear new, and renovated ancient buildings. He always wore a nice suit, but his hands were rough from hard work. This man had previously worked extensively with his hands, and it appeared that he still does so on occasion. He walked in yesterday, Sunday, wearing blue jeans and a worn-out work shirt. "What can I get you this morning, dear?" she inquired as she poured him his first cup. She placed the jug on the table, close enough for him to reach with his long arms, but far enough away from his hands to not get in the way. He expressed his gratitude with a smile. He replied, "Orange juice, Western omelet, hash browns, biscuits, and some ham," pointing to menu item number 6. She knew he'd beg for it. He'd ordered the same thing the previous 3 mornings. She took the folded menu from him after noting his order. She said, "Coming right up," and walked away. She wanted to stay and talk to the man. The more she stared at him, the more she appreciated his clear blue eyes, powerful jawline, and the fact that he appeared to be strong beneath his old clothes. She began to wonder. Then she stopped thinking about it. She had been with Fred for nearly a year and didn't want her mind to wander. He was far too young for her anyway. Ryan saw her place the check for his order beneath the spring clip on the round metal order wheel and spin it so the cook could see it. The cook nodded, indicating that it was a fresh order. The hostess hurried rapidly to welcome newcomers. The line was expanding. This early Monday morning, it appeared like the majority of the little village had elected not to make their own breakfast. The air was filled with pleasant conversation, the sound of plates clinking, and the occasional burst of laughing. The smell of cooked eggs, bacon, and sausage biscuits and cinnamon pastries in the kitchen made his mouth swim. Ryan smiled. He enjoyed this location and began to develop feelings for the kind and cheerful waitress. She seemed to demonstrate how the people in this tiny town were similar to a tiny village. The town was small, with perhaps less than 500 people residing there. Most of them resembled the lady serving coffee. At first, she was shy, but she later became warm and talkative. When she first met you, she sat with him for 20 minutes on Sunday when the cafe was quiet. This had made Ryan very delighted. A large number of individuals were now coming in to eat. It was early, but in the Texas countryside, folks rose with the sun to avoid the heat of the day. Perhaps they didn't need to anymore, especially after Ryan's team repaired the air conditioning in the old court building. But old habits die hard. This location was only 50 miles from the huge city of San Antonio, which has 1.5 million people. Yet everything appeared locked in time, like something from the 1800s. Sure, the massive concrete road Interstate 10 runs right next to the cafe, but the people here barely paid for it. Any thoughts? Ryan assumed their forefathers didn't care much about the large herds of cattle that passed through after the battle. He often wished he could have lived back then. He felt he was born roughly 150 years too late. He attempted to snap out of these old dreams. The strong coffee helped. He looked at it skeptically. It was quite strong. He joked with himself that it could raise a horseshoe. Last Friday, while clearing soil for a new garage behind someone's house, his team discovered a slew of these antique iron shoes. Taking another sip, he chuckled to himself, realizing that this beverage could truly lift 2 of those hefty things. Ryan Gilchrist had come a long way in the little community, keeping a careful eye on some minor repair projects. The coffee here was rather delicious. 4 years ago, Ryan was only a little fish in a large lake. He'd grown a little. Many of the fish in the lake were smaller than his. His workload had grown so large that he spent the majority of his days sitting at a desk. He needed to get an office in a tall building in the center of town. He didn't enjoy working there. He frequently mentioned that he missed performing real job. Ryan has worked hard over the last 4 years and attended night school at UTSA. He had to take breaks from work to complete his lessons during the day. He eventually earned a business degree with an emphasis on resource management. He figured it would help him operate his tiny business better. Some classes were beneficial, while others were merely satisfactory. But for many, he had to memorize irrelevant information in order to pass assessments. Sometimes, he had to choose responses that he knew were incorrect in real life. That bothered him a lot, but that was all behind him now, and he was beginning to forget those annoying aspects. He was certain he wouldn't return for more school. His thoughts jumped from one topic to the next as he sat in the quiet cafe, surrounded by friendly people, waiting for his breakfast. He enjoyed the warmth and friendliness. He misses feeling that way at home. Thinking about home made him uneasy. He didn't feel like he had a real home anymore. Ryan had a lot going on at work. Things were looking so good that he had to employ a helper to keep up with all the calls. He also hired someone part-time to handle the money, ensuring that everyone was properly paid and that all documentation was completed on time. Ryan handled the day-to-day operations, ensuring that his 8 teams, totaling 52 workers, were properly set up. Half of these individuals had served in the military. They were a reliable group, usually on top of things. Concerns regarding Ryan's business grew as a result of his excellent crew. Ryan had 3 teams working hard today in a little Texas hamlet away from the hustle and bustle of the city. He joked about being there to monitor the work, but in reality he was avoiding his wife. He simply couldn't be around her anymore. No, he murmured into his coffee. I am not going through that again. Fool me once. Shame on me. I am not going to let this happen again. He couldn't forgive her for cheating the second time. He wasn't sure why he remained the first time, but he knew he wasn't going to stay again. He had a plan, and it was nearly ready. After discovering a tape of her initial slip-up, he began keeping a recorder in her car every day and switching it out to listen. Later, he was surprised to hear her disparaging him. His business, their friends, and almost everything about their existence together. He heard her repeatedly rewrite their past. Some of what she claimed he did, such as being cruel to her, was just not true. He never hit or hurt her as she claimed. Much of what she claimed was made up. He couldn't understand why his wife was lying like way bit by bit. Ryan figured it out. Even though he was careful, certain things slipped past him. He realized now that many of their friends had heard her complaints. He could tell from the way they looked at him. Some former pals avoided him at events. He sensed why they were chilly and aloof. It was all due to Carrie's falsehoods. He understood why her brother and sisters did not talk to him much. He could see why her parents seldom spoke to him anymore. Her lies caused him to reconsider his plan. At first, he planned to just inform her that he knew and was leaving. Texas allows you to divorce without blaming anyone, and it just takes 60 days to be official. But now he wanted to show that she was lying, particularly about meeting someone else. He chose to pursue a complete divorce trial. He intended to utilize it to express his viewpoint. He'd have his lawyer contest her wishes and make firm demands. There would be plenty of arguing and back and forth. It might cost him everything, but he didn't mind losing his business. At the very least, she would not receive a share of his modest business, which was beginning to thrive. He had no means to demonstrate. Most of her statements were false. The majority of what she claimed was happening did not occur, and it was difficult to demonstrate such things did not happen. She continued saying he had wounded her. She informed people over the phone, and he overheard. He felt he could fight back on that. He often fantasized about standing in court and displaying his big biceps, wondering if anyone truly believed he could damage Carrie without putting her in the hospital for an extended period. But it was only a dream. It wouldn't happen, but it helped him stay focused during the difficult nights. Ryan was deeply offended by Carrie's falsehoods. He felt she should be called out. He didn't understand why she was working so hard to change how people perceived him. It wasn't right, but he felt trapped, feeling stuck. It only made everything seem worse. He was becoming increasingly enraged and didn't know how much longer he could keep it together. He knew himself pretty well. He wasn't the sort to take things without a struggle. He laughed to himself as he gazed out the cafe window. Dr. Christopher had warned Ryan, recalling something his therapist had said, that he was a bit quick to get angry. Ryan had joked with the doctor. He knew it was true. That's why he stopped carrying his Glock recently. He was afraid he'd do something he'd later regret instead of using it to protect Carrie. Now there was nothing left. She wasn't worth the danger anymore. If he shot her or Shawn, he'd be imprisoned in Huntsville for very some time. He did not think she was worth the hassle. He truly did not want to end up in prison. His mind was unfocused on anything. He had nothing pressing to think about, so his mind wandered. He was not striving to solve his problems. His mind drifted as he waited for his food. He despised imprisonment. Even a brief stay inside had made him loathe them greatly. The judge had been kind on him for punching his wife's first guy and injuring Carrie. The person in charge of the case chose to reduce the charge, and the judge agreed. As a result, Ryan's attorney persuaded him not to request a jury trial. He received merely 40 hours of community service and 30 days in a municipal jail. Not nearly as harsh as a state prison. They even released him after only 7 days in jail, with the remainder suspended. After a year and a half, he was able to work during the day without incident. The judge wiped out the remainder of his penalty. He had already completed the 40 hours of community service, and he didn't mind. He truly enjoyed it, spending extra time reading to children in the library. Ryan heard that the guy with his wife was furious at the minimal sentence. Marshall lost one portion, and the other slowly recovered. But the man did not file an official complaint. His wife told him it was fine because they already had 3 children. Furthermore, she threatened that if he didn't stop talking and start making things right with her and the kids, she would chop off his final ball and eat it for dinner. They relocated to Denver after he was better. He first noticed them on a restaurant menu. Marshall felt nauseous when he discovered what Rocky Mountain oysters were. The family had to leave, with Marshall's wife smiling and apologizing to the woman who had just sat them down. The youngsters were equally as happy to eat fried chicken at the KFC near the freeway. Marshall never discovered that his wife had recounted the story to acquaintances in San Antonio. News travels quickly. The memory-induced smile faded slowly. Another memory took its place during a work trip to Dallas a year ago. He discovered a shop that was closing in a not-so-great mall. They sold a variety of surveillance devices but chose a terrible location. The owner was relocating to a large mall downtown, but he needed to wait for a space to open. He had to either sell everything cheaply or pay a high price to keep it in storage. Ryan received a variety of small spy cameras, listening devices, phone calls, binoculars, a good digital camera, 3 VCRs, and other espionage equipment. He only started using the equipment during the last 3 months. He hadn't had to previously. He hid the little spy cameras all throughout the house, not knowing where Carrie would take her new partner if she did take him home. It turns out she had no trouble sharing Ryan and her bed with Shawn for a week. Ryan was irritated by her choice of location while hunting with her father, but he had a feeling it was coming. She didn't care much about him these days, almost as if she was obligated to make such a move. He'd set up 3 of his 12 cameras in the main bedroom, catching everything. Carrie and Shawn are getting busy in. Ryan was putting together a film for her parents and their friends that featured several main acts. He also guessed the bank where Shawn was a prominent player. You might want to watch the video he had of Shawn in the buff, working on his laptop and Ryan in Carrie's kitchen. Shawn had connected to the internet via the phone line by the table. Ryan suspected Shawn was tapping into the bank stuff, working away while taking a break from the wild things he was up to with his worker. The cherry on top was getting them on video, speaking about Shawn and Carrie's family and shared friends while taking breaks from their cheating fun. Ryan intended to select those sections to display to Carrie's family and friends who had been duped by his lies. He was ready to reveal the true colors of the adulterous couple. He had everything he needed. He only had to wait for the proper time. "Excuse me, mister?" The cafe lady seemed surprised when Ryan didn't respond right away. He was typically on the ball. "I apologize," Ryan said. "I guess I did some zoning out there." He blinked. Those negative ideas and plans had seized him tightly. It was not the first time he had battled to return to the present. "Oh, it's fine, hun," she said. "Look, it's very busy this morning, and I was wondering whether you would be willing to share your table with Connie and little Belinda here." Ryan looked around, only to realize that every seat was already taken, though he did notice several open spaces. He was taken aback when the hostess approached him about allowing guests to use his large table. He didn't want to, but it appeared he had no choice. Then he noticed the tall, attractive woman with sleek dark hair standing next to the waitress and the young child with her. He now felt a lot better about the situation. It took him a second to snap out of it. Realizing he was still sitting, he got up awkwardly. "Sorry." He spoke to them. "I was trained to be courteous." "I mean, I am, but sometimes I'm a little slow," he continued. He gently touched the waitress's arm. "I'd be delighted if Connie and Belinda could sit with me." He managed to say something while attempting to remember their names. "Thank you," chirped the small girl in a clear, fresh voice. Ryan waited for the woman to speak. He had not expected the girl to respond. He looked down, but the girl had already moved around him and was climbing the bench. "May I have my booster seat, please?" she asked in a gentle voice, pointing behind him. Ryan, perplexed, went to the woman he assumed was her mother. He then spotted the waitress offering him the booster seat. "Oh," Ryan apologized, feeling horrible. He took the waitress's seat and helped the girl onto the bench. "Thank you," she replied, grinning at him. Ryan was going to sit across the table when the girl interrupted him. "I want my mom to sit there," she stated firmly. She pointed to the bench across. "You sit here." The girl pointed to the place beside hers. Ryan gazed up at the girl's mother, puzzled and slightly sad. "She's quite shy, right?" the woman inquired, her voice deep yet sweet. She smiled broadly and motioned him over to sit. "I don't mind if you're good with it," she added. Ryan made his decision based on the little girl's large smile. "I'd be delighted to sit with you," he remarked to the child, appearing to be formal. He entered the booth next to her. He grinned in response to the excitement in her eyes. It had been a long time since he felt that way. "Welcome, I'm Ryan." He spoke, introducing himself. "Connie, Consuela Robertson." The woman spoke. "That's Belinda, the little troublemaker at Vargas Preschool," pointing to the blonde kid next to Ryan. "Mom," Belinda said, upset. "That is mean." Ryan laughed, completely taken with the mother and her daughter. The woman extended her hand and they shook hands. He liked the way her touch felt. It was slim, ladylike, and robust. He gazed at her. "Do people call you Connie or Consuela?" he asked directly. She halted, gazing at him warily. "I like Consuela," she said. "But Connie is nice too. Many folks call me that." She hurried to add. Ryan commented that Consuela is a lovely name. I believe it suits you more than Connie. May I call you Consuela? He asked. He waited for her response, which did not come immediately. He considered it possible that he had made a mistake. I think I'd enjoy that. She finally mentioned that the two women seated behind Ryan looked at each other. They grinned with an underlying meaning. Consuela had moved here shortly after her baby was born, coming back after a horrible marriage. Belinda was about 4.5 years old. This was the first time anyone had seen Consuela. Some people thought Connie enjoyed being with men. On Wednesday, Ryan waited for Consuela and Belinda to arrive before eating his breakfast. When they walked in, Belinda broke away from her mother and ran for him. She jumped in the air and he grabbed her. Linda. Her mother spoke, catching up. You are not to do that. The 4-year-old said, It's okay, Mommy. Mr. Ryan caught me. Was that all for her? She moved on to another subject. She said, I'm going to eat breakfast on his lap today. Sweetie, even if he caught you, what if he missed you or something? Plus, you're not sure if Mr. Ryan wants you to sit with him or join us for breakfast. Belinda quickly glanced at Ryan before returning her attention to her mother. Does he? Belinda spoke confidently. Ryan cleared his throat. It is true, but just to be sure, he asked Miss Robertson, would you like to have breakfast with me, lovely Belinda? He expressed it in a light manner. He and the woman smiled as they took their seats at the table they had chosen that morning. Belinda sat on his lap for the whole of the dinner, rising to eat bits from either his or her plate before lying back against him. She became antsy at the conclusion of the lunch when a friend and her parents entered. Belinda climbed down to visit her. This left Ryan and Consuela alone for the first time. All of a sudden, things felt strange. They weren't sure what to say. You do not remember me, do you? Consuela inquired out of the blue. Ryan cocked his head and peered at her intently. He gazed at her for a time. Her long, dark hair accentuated the curve of her face. Her complexion was bright and clear. She wore minimal makeup with only black eyelashes and sparkling lips. Her black eyes were already beautiful without it. Her lips were large. And yeah, he felt they were really attractive to kiss. He observed that when he stood up, her head was just below his chin. She must be about 5 feet and a bit tall. She was small but had curves in all the right places, and her legs, from what he could see, were fantastic. He finally said, Consuela, if I had seen you before, I am sure I would remember. I rarely forget gorgeous women. He talked seriously. Consuela blushed slightly after feeling his stare and hearing his remarks. It was only twice and very quickly, she replied, in the bank where your wife works. Once, the girl next to me assisted you with a check while your wife was present. That was before I moved to Mr. Michael's neighborhood, and another time Carrie waved at me while you were there and you looked back to see who it was. Perhaps 1 year and 3 months ago, or perhaps 1.5 years. Ryan shakes his head. He attempted to recall seeing her at the bank, but he couldn't. I apologize, he said. If I was with Carrie, I was probably chatting to her, paying her attention, or at least attempting to, he continued, feeling a little stupid. So you occasionally forget about ladies, Consuela joked. Ryan laughed as he remarked, I must have been really distracted. If I were with Carrie, she'd strive to keep my full attention on her. At least back then. I know, Consuela replied. She locked eyes with Ryan for a time. She believed she spotted something when they were talking about Carrie. How is Carrie doing? She asked unexpectedly. His expression indicated that something was wrong. You understand, don't you? She explained, feeling sorry for him. Ryan made a face. Consuela simply shrugged. I left there 2 months ago. Everyone in the bank. Even those who saw them together understand what's going on. Ryan gave a quiet giggle and shook his head, his eyes filled with concern. They aren't hiding it, are they? She shakes her head. At first, they attempted, but many of us realized what was going on. What buddies are still there? Tell me. It is becoming more and more evident. Ryan made a bad guess. Consuela responded, I was about to say something brazen. If this means anything, I apologize. Everyone believes that Mr. Michaels is a bad guy. Nobody understands why Carrie seized him. Ryan added quietly, I'm sorry as well. I've had reservations for 3 months and have been gathering evidence for a few weeks, he explained. I think I have enough now against both of them, he said. Consuela appeared shocked by him. That's a strong way to phrase it, she finally admitted. Ryan noticed she was becoming eager. Her eyes gleamed. Her breathing increased. She hurriedly glanced around for Belinda. No, I did not leave my work in San Antonio. She admitted that I did exactly what I said. I resigned because I filed a sexual harassment charge against Shawn Michaels, which went all the way to the head office in Chicago. She claimed Ryan was patient. He had been waiting since Monday for Consuela to open up. He thought there was more to it. After a few months, the complaint was returned back. The Chicago office claimed they couldn't verify it, so they did nothing. Consuela? His cheeks grew red with rage as she remembered. Her eyes gleamed with wrath. After that, I received a few negative job reviews. 3 times my job assignments had minor and easy-to-resolve account concerns, and they called me out, she said with a strong tone, a little looking, and they were all resolved. But it didn't appear to count. They didn't fuss over others for things that needed to be checked. But they hit me hard. Consuela shifted in her seat, her rage over how they treated her palpable. It made her feel insignificant and angry at the same time. Ryan nodded her way, hoping she'd continue. They sent me to the investing side for a while, but then a lady returned from having her baby and there was no room for me. They implied that I might have to return to the front desk position. Worse, I'd be working all weekends, including a late shift at a drive-thru that would stay open late. They were aware that I had a young girl at home. That schedule would not work for me. Consuela's tone indicated her distress and wrath. She took a breath and tried to smile as she noticed Belinda waving at her. They made it rather easy for me to go. I'll admit, she said. They never said it, but it was evident that I could leave and they would still talk positively about me. If I stayed, I would scarcely see my girl. She wouldn't recognize me, and if I made a huge deal, I'd be out of banking forever. She was trying to control her respiration while sitting restlessly. Her hands continued to move in her lap. Consuela was upset, and her wrath mixed with Ryan's. They felt so strong, as if they could touch them. Consuela clenched her eyes tightly, trying to remain calm. Slowly, she stopped shaking. Her expression relaxed. Her shoulders dropped. "Hello, Mommy." There was an unexpected tiny voice. Belinda hadn't noticed her mother crying as she walked back. "Mommy," Belinda said, appearing terrified. "Are you crying?" Consuela's eyes fluttered awake as she heard Belinda. She bent down and revealed her wide-open eyes. "There are no tears there," she smiled. "No, sweetheart," Consuela informed her. "I just close my eyes and think," she explained. Belinda appeared unsure, but she didn't elaborate. "Tasha and her family were dining, so I came here," she spoke to her mother. "I am glad you did," Ryan stated. He picked her up and placed her on his knee. He said, "I still don't know your ticklish spots." Belinda wriggled on his knee, waiting for tickles. She placed her hands up against her neck to protect it. Ryan tickled her sides for a moment. When Belinda shifted her hands, he lunged for her neck and she laughed out loud. "Linda," Consuela said quickly. "You should not." Ryan apologized. "I should know this, right? Belinda?" "Hug me and I'll stop," he said. Belinda did not want him to quit, but she knew what to do. She hugged Ryan tightly. "I have something to tell you." Consuela spoke. The kids were making a lot of noise in the large plastic tubes above. She needed to get near to Ryan so he could hear her without yelling. Ryan chose the McDonald's near the freeway for dinner since he thought Belinda would enjoy the play area. She struggled to sit and eat her chicken parts and fries. This was Ryan's first meal with them. Aside from breakfast, this was the first time they had met twice in one day. Wednesday was packed with news for them. Ryan gazed at Consuela and absorbed her words. "You had some information to share with me concerning Carrie, as well as some workplace issues you'd been experiencing since Monday." He guessed Consuela. His eyes grew larger, then smaller. "Did you know?" she inquired, her voice tense. He could see she was fast to rage despite the fact that he had only met her 3 days before. To remain cool, he shook his head. "I suppose Trish had a reason for seating you with me," he said, trying to seem cautious. Trish, the cafe's principal server and hostess, had been keeping an eye out for Ryan since he first started going there. She had spent time talking with Consuela and Ryan as they paid for their breakfast that morning. It was a good chat. At first I assumed it was because I looked well, but then I saw myself in the mirror. He joked, wanting to keep the mood light. "So I assumed you might want to talk or need something from me. After I considered some additional reasons that didn't seem appropriate for you," he said quietly. "I assumed you'd inform me when you were ready. And up until that point, I had been having more fun with you and Belinda than I had in quite some time," he told her. Consuela blushed slightly, which suited her. "I suppose I should have told you since I recognized you on Monday," she remarked quietly. She wanted to be upset with Ryan for guessing. She wanted to discuss something important, but she just couldn't. He was honest, which made it difficult for her to stay angry. "It's okay," Ryan said. "I enjoyed being with you. I've already mentioned that." He glanced at her with curiosity. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Consuela took a large breath. "We did not cover everything today. My problem at work is no longer merely a complaint. I took it to federal court 3 weeks ago. I was wondering if you could announce out loud that Shawn Michaels is seeing my wife," she said. "My lawyer hasn't seen you yet, but she stated that if we can establish that Mr. Michaels continues to do what he did with me, we might win." She stopped attempting to explain and stared at Ryan. "I agree," she added in a quiet voice. Ryan looked puzzled for a while, unsure what he had missed. "I loved myself and Belinda enjoyed eating breakfast with you," Consuela attempted to explain. Ryan's expression cleared and he smiled. "I'm happy," he murmured gently after a brief pause. "If it helps, I'll tell you what I know about the affair," he said, returning to the initial topic. "I don't know much about legal matters, but I'll say what I can," he said. "Are you sure?" Consuela inquired gently. "You can say that Michael is sleeping with my wife," Ryan asked. Consuela nodded. Too shy to express it? "Yes, I can say that," Ryan promised her. Consuela gazed at him, her eyes filled with overwhelming sympathy. "Perhaps not." She spoke slowly. "Perhaps you shouldn't. There could be difficult questions." Ryan gave a frigid, harsh smile. "Consuela, my marriage is over. She breached our vows. They're completely broken now. My marriage died the moment she started seeing Shawn Michaels. I've been accumulating evidence for the court to establish that she cheated. I am going to tell everyone to show what she did and is doing. I am divorcing Carrie to make it official, although it has been over for a long. I've watched her for months, allowing my love for her to diminish." Consuela gazed at Ryan. She saw a new side to him. As his fury mounted, his blue eyes turned frigid. She believed him. He intended to teach Shawn Michaels a lesson. Her cheeks lit up with a gentle smile. "Ryan, you're powerful enough to carry out your plans." "Mr. Michaels chose the wrong guy to mess with," she remarked softly. Ryan was caught off guard by her statements. His rage subsided a little, and he smiled at the lovely lady seated beside him. But suddenly her expression became serious. "You have proof, right?" she asked. "What about pictures?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, I have videotapes of them together. Recordings from phone conversations and cassettes of her discussing her lover in her car. I received a lot." Ryan shared. "The phone conversations may not be relevant in court unless she lies about them. Then, they can be used to prove she is lying. Videos of her being close to him in the bank, on the street, and entering our home can be used. The ones of her and him on our bed are probably all right as well. I feel I have the right to record what happens in my home. They display a lot, let's say." "Oh, wow," Consuela whispered. "I apologize." Ryan laughed. "It's unfortunate you saw that, but you caught them both." "Oh, yes," he emphasized, pleased with his proof. "I got him too," he added. "I haven't spoken with a lawyer yet, but I have my own case to make." Ryan reviewed Carrie's contract again and discovered a clear regulation about behavior on the second page. It was plain to see. Nothing was hidden. He reasoned that if Carrie's contract had this provision, Michael's must as well. If the bank does not follow its own standards, they should face consequences, right? Ryan paused before saying, "Like I told you, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe we can help each other with these things. In my court case, you may say, what's the word? They have a consistent style of doing things. They didn't try to stop it. I wonder what the legal phrase is for that." For the first time in a long time, he grinned and considered consulting with a lawyer. He saw a method to keep his business operating after the divorce. According to Texas law, if one person in a marriage does anything wrong, such as infidelity, it may affect how the divorce is settled. Ryan was already planning to take advantage of this, and he hoped that a court action would provide him with even more money to buy Carrie out of the business. Thursday at the cafe was a letdown. Ryan was present as usual, but Consuela wasn't. Ryan knew it was because she had an early shift at the bank, where she worked as an assistant manager. The regulars felt terrible for Ryan because he was eating alone, but they missed. While waiting for his omelet, He kept himself company with a book. He wouldn't have brought a book if he expected others to join him. The novel was a Western by Louis L'Amour. Ryan adored Westerns. They told stories about a time when a guy could build a reputation for himself simply by being bold, gutsy, and refusing to take crap from anyone. It worked in the stories of L'Amour's heroes over and again. This novel had a side story of a young wife who chose a horrible man as her lover, despite the fact that he was quick on the draw. Her humble farm husband had attempted to confront the bad guy with his gun, but it was a losing battle from the start. The poor farmer met a tragic end when the wife's boyfriend shot him. Ryan felt affinity with the country boy. Against all odds, he had picked up a gun, which he was not used to, fight for his wife and his pride. It wasn't the greatest decision, but Ryan understood why the man couldn't bear the prospect of doing nothing. Ryan grabbed him. I really got him. The omelet that morning was excellent. Trish had winked at the cook to add more of Ryan's favorite mushrooms and sausage. He received snacks. Even some of the old-timers didn't get it. A couple of people noticed the thick omelet and realized right once that Ryan had gained Trisha's favor. Ryan and Consuela followed her lead and chose a Golden Corral location outside of San Antonio for their Thursday night encounter. Reduce the likelihood of running into someone they knew. It made sense because he was still married, something many people could not understand. They were preparing cases against a major bank, its San Antonio branch, and several of its senior executives. Ryan noticed how Consuela asked questions and spoke, moving her fork as if she were conducting an orchestra. "It's in her blood," she explained. Her grandmother had resided in a little town in Mexico. She wanted her hands free to get her words out correctly. Ryan joked that if her hands were roped back, she'd be gagged. She halted and poked her tongue out at him. He let out a genuine chuckle, something he hadn't done since who knows when. She was surprised to find that his great-grandfather was entirely Comanche. She looked at his face, observing that his prominent cheekbones appeared to be the sole traces of that heritage. His blue eyes and blonde hair plainly come from a different line. They eventually agreed that their Scottish and Irish ancestors likely covered up the majority of their family genes. Consuela inquired whether Ryan was aware of the Irish dance schools in San Antonio, as well as the annual dance competition held in a local hotel. Ryan had no idea. Consuela suggested he go next October. He claimed he would if she agreed to join him. She agreed. They quieted down to concentrate on their dinner for a while. "Can we use the tapes in court, including for divorce?" she finally asked. Ryan shrugged. "I believe a skilled lawyer might find a way to use them." He responded after a pause. If not, he smirked, "I'll make the DVD into Christmas gifts for her family and our friends." "I assumed you'd specified videotapes," Consuela stated nonchalantly, finishing her salad. I do," Ryan responded. "However, I recently purchased a high-performance computer for business and loaded an application that converts digital camera footage to DVD format." He noted her bewildered expression. He stated that first, he needed to play the VHS tapes and record them with his digital camera. "Seems like a lot of work." She mentioned, "Yeah, not the most elegant manner," he said. "But I wanted to accomplish this investigative job cheaply and didn't want to ask too many questions. Given what it is about, I had to be a little imaginative." "I think you did an excellent job," Consuela said immediately. "You have far more evidence for what you're intending than I have," she said. Ryan paused to consider her comments. It was good to be praised for doing something right. He did, not just getting yelled off, as Carrie always did. Now. "Well," he explained, taking a piece of his steak with sauce, "I believe I can help us out." "We took a couple pictures of the geek at our kitchen table. Buttocks are exposed, but the man is busy on his laptop." "No way. Consuela actually stated that?" She turned red, torn between happiness and shyness at what Ryan said. "Yes," Ryan answered, "logging into a network, accessing a server, and doing financial transactions." "What is his work again?" "He is in charge of the fancy money stuff for the super rich." She claimed he manages their money and places bets on their behalf if they request it, watches over their trust funds, moves money to other banks when they require it. Ryan thought for a moment. "Moves money. Wire moves," she said after a drink of Western Union. "Kind of. Yeah, but much bigger," she said. "Every day, millions of people take to the skies." "I see," he said, thinking hard. They put a lot of trust in him. He wondered aloud, He laughed if they saw him struggling to type his password and yelling at his laptop like a brat because it wouldn't work. I don't think they'd trust him much. It's possible that a wealthy individual's money will find up in the wrong hands. He's quite awful with computers. Consuela also laughed. Couldn't get his password right, did you see that? Yep, I tried over and over. Ryan explained that it had never worked. Gary had to come down both as naked as the day they were born, and she did it for him. That's a big no-no. I guess the bank wouldn't appreciate that one bit. He paused, thinking, I simply know we might not need to hit the court. He added, the bank folks won't like the buzz. Once I reveal what I got, they'll bend over to make us a deal. Cool, right? You might be onto something. Consuela nodded. He types in his secret word for you to see, and Carrie is also aware of it, she mused. Yes, Ryan said. Consuela let out a huff. She scoffed. What a dope! I was only given information about minor issues. He can touch every account and perform tricks, she added. Big mistake letting someone else know your secret word. She shakes her head. This is correct. Ryan nodded. Lucky. Carrie remained quiet. Consuela replied, taking a sip. She'd destroy him if she wanted. Sure you could. Ryan thought aloud. I could too, he said softly. I saw him type enough times. Fortunately, you're a good guy. Consuela gave him a smile. Ryan shakes his head. I would not bet on it, he replied. I cannot stand him or her, he added. They shared a laugh. Did you go to Louis L'Amour? She inquired, inspecting Ryan's book. She was late and had warned him. Oh yes, Ryan perked up. He and Tom Clancy are both capable of spinning yarns. I get it, she said. What's with the Louis L'Amour thing? They talked more. They were generous with the waitress. She was nice to them. On her return home, she kept the tea going and allowed them to linger long after they had finished eating. Consuela Robertson reflected on her talks with Ryan Gilchrist tonight. It was lovely to be with a handsome man after so long. It took her years to overcome her divorce. She hadn't trusted men in a long time, but she believed him. He listened to her and appeared to be big and strong. However, he was also kind to Belinda. He did not believe he looked nice at all. He mentioned something about it last night. But he was. He also talked well. When they talked, he didn't jump to the conclusion that she was wrong. It was good to be with him. Her thoughts was preoccupied as she drove into the gravel driveway. She sat in the car for a while with the lights off. It was a habit she developed when living in Albuquerque when she first married. Their residence was near one gang's territory and too close to another. Gunshots could be heard almost every weekend. She had learned to examine the darkness before venturing out. It was critical to know who was present before venturing out. No one was in the dark here. She heard there was gang activity in San Antonio, but it hadn't spread here yet. The neighborhood wasn't particularly attractive, but her neighbors were all retired or hard-working individuals with various jobs in the area. She exhaled. She sometimes felt like her neighborhood was a reflection of her life. She was nearly 30 years old. Time was flowing along with the houses on her block. The houses required some care, and the air was a little depressing since that care was taking too long. Some of her neighbors had already abandoned hope. She adjusted her shoulders and shook her head to get rid of the vibe she got from her 9-year-old Mercury before walking next door to Mrs. Alvarez to pick up Belinda. A little later, as she was getting her daughter ready for bed. Consuela found herself fantasizing. A notion had arisen, a plan that blossomed and was expressed in her head in a matter of moments. She wanted to get back at someone, but how would Ryan react to her plan? What does he think about her? She realized she cared a lot about his opinion. Would you like to check out the DVDs? Ryan inquired, puzzled. It was Friday night, which was generally a great time, but as far as he knew, that wasn't Consuela's style. Plus, the infant was in the next room. Belinda was intended to sleep, but she fought it. She didn't want to miss out with Ryan present. This was his first visit. Belinda pounced on Ryan's lap when he arrived and refused to leave his side. Ryan didn't help much with Consuela's attempts to separate them. The tiny 4-year-old was really affecting him. Lady, those aren't just for fun, you understand? There's a lot of sex, talking about it, and being rude to others. It's simply not. Yes, I understand. Consuela cut in. She tried to conceal her blush, which began in her neck. Ryan looked at her for a bit before smiling. I was joking. The vids are not even excellent. The majority are dull. If you want to watch, I guess that's fine. He was making fun. He didn't think she wanted to see those types of videos. He was lacking something else. He noticed her flush extend to her ears. No, she replied hastily. She looked for the appropriate words. Look, Ryan, do you recall the book we discussed last night? Right? Ryan thought for a moment. He still didn't understand it. Yeah. Consuela licks her lips. Ryan saw but nearly missed what she said next. You can see why the farm boy wanted to hurt his wife's boyfriend, right? She asked. And you mentioned you're not sure why you didn't hurt your wife's first partner, correct? Didn't you mention it last night? And you stopped carrying your gun because you were afraid of what you would do if you saw Shawn Michaels? Ryan nodded. They had revealed numerous secrets previous night. He told Consuela things he had never told anyone else. Consuela began to pace. Her residence was little, only 3 steps from the couch to the television. She shifted back and forth quickly, anxious. We can make that guy much more upset than simply terminating him, she continued. Ryan was shocked. She phoned a cab for Shawn. Ryan is quite angry. The phrase referred to a male goat, but it was also a swear word for a really terrible person. It demonstrated how enraged Consuela was at him. He considered what to do while she paced. Consuela sought vengeance on Mr. Shawn Michaels. She was furious because Michaels had asked her to meet him for sick at an apartment near the downtown bank 6 months before. He refused to take no for an answer and pursued her for weeks before attempting to terminate her. Ryan, on the other hand, was more unhappy with his wife for cheating than with the man she was seeing, yet he still harbored resentment toward Michaels. Carrie hadn't even removed her wedding band while with Michaels. It was there, along with Ryan's videos of them cheating. Even if Shawn Michaels had never met Ryan, they had run into each other several times. He was certain he was in bed with a man's wife in an era long past, as in the days of Ryan's great-great-grandfather. Ryan could have confronted Michaels and shot him on the spot. Ryan recalled an old Wild West book he had read. He always believed he was born too late. He wanted to exact revenge on the man who had humiliated him. He gave a harsh smile. What is your plan? He asked. So what are your thoughts? Consuela inquired, a little apprehensive. She perched on the edge of the couch. She stared at Ryan, concerned. She was unsure how he would react to her plan. It was extremely risky and against the law. Ryan went back and forth for a while. He was mostly a good person. However, he is not overly strict with himself. Dealing with a local union as his little firm grew showed him that everyone had some greed. The money he was paying to a bogus security business to keep union issues at bay was suspicious. He didn't want the union interfering with his work, and they were fine as long as they got paid. He wasn't sure if paying them off was illegal, but it was clearly improper for the union representative to request it. Ryan had been silent thus far, but Consuela's idea was a major leap into the realm of illegal activity. Can he handle it? It's a big gamble. He spoke after a time. Very huge. He then sat across from her and leaned back, pondering with his eyes closed. He said after a while, and without becoming too greedy, how can we set up bank accounts for wire transfers? He then asked. Consuela paused before responding, obviously nervous. My mother's uncle Roberto lives in Mexico City. She kind of mumbled, he has a company that deals with bringing things in and out of the country and travels all over the Caribbean for work. He knows a ton of people, some have friends. Her voice faded away. They said nothing about her, implying that her great-uncle knew a wide range of individuals, some of whom could preserve secrets for the proper price. We have the secret codes, he thought aloud, but no one knew. We do. Nobody would have guessed we could. He paused for a moment. Unless they see my video, he stated, looking directly at Consuela. All of this better be worth giving up my revenge on my wife, he informed her, really soft. Why? She appeared puzzled. You can still display the pieces when she was with the guy, just not the kitchen supplies. She paused. Ryan shook his head. No, if someone suspects I have spy cameras in one location, they will ask why not. More. Got it? She did. It was too obvious to argue. Ryan closed his eyes again and leaned back. I paid cash for the cameras and everything, he said, kind of thinking aloud. That is all the seller wanted. The guy was in a haste to sell his belongings for quick cash. I didn't get any papers with my name on them. All of this occurred in Dallas well over a year ago. There is no real paper trace. Yes, there is a cash receipt, but I know where it is. I can simply burn it. then there is nothing. He probably has a record of selling it, but it doesn't specify it was to me. He never asked for my name, and I never said it. He didn't recognize me and couldn't point me out. Even if the cops discover him and talk to him, there's no need to worry. We can get rid of everything, including the VHS cassettes, DVDs, tape recordings, cameras, and tape decks. It's all in one place in my garage, and all of the evidence I have is in my truck, he replied, speaking to the air as if thinking aloud. We'll toss it all, definitely after washing up my prints. I didn't put any holes in the wall for the cameras or anything. He assumed they were only hidden in places. I knew Carrie would not look. He laughed a little. Not the housekeeper type. She is not. What else am I forgetting? Anything. They talked late into the night about how to get rid of all the stuff he had on his wife. It was difficult to let go, but it was critical that no one suspected Ryan had been snooping around. If they did, there might be some difficult questions regarding what he discovered. It's better not to take the chance. Consuela had no idea how she'd access to Michael's laptop, but Ryan had it figured out. Michaels and Carrie were always rushing. When they reached the house, the laptop was repeatedly tossed on the sofa. I waited there till one of them came down. Ryan also devised a plan for him and Consuela to go to the Gilchrists' house without being noticed. Behind the home, there was a large natural area with heavy plants and trees. Ryan had looked around there. After they moved in, he knew how to get from a roadway on the far side of the empty property to their backyard. It was only a short stroll, 5 to 10 minutes at most. Once there, anyone fit could climb over the metal barrier that surrounded the yard. He and Consuela were in great shape. Jumping the barrier would be simple for them. At the house, the back door slid open and shut quietly. He might leave it unlocked when he departed for work. He'd go after Carrie had left, and he was confident she wouldn't check it when she returned with her close friend. The back entrance opened directly into the dining room, and only a few steps away was the kitchen with the phone line. The couch in the living area where the laptop would go was immediately beyond a large door from the dining room. Getting out would just entail walking back the way they came. They didn't know how long Consuela would have the laptop. They planned to time their breaks. Michaels and Carrie recorded with a stopwatch from VHS cassettes. They assumed they'd only get one chance, but then found they could do it several times. It had to be rapid, like within a week, but it would be enough to withdraw a large sum of money from the bank and make them feel it. Ryan imagined Carrie would be delighted to have her friend around if she believed Ryan was away. She was probably with Shawn every day this week while he was away. He would find out when he returned home. He left all the cameras running so there would be new tapes. They stopped planning for the night to be over, thinking about anything else before splitting up. They agreed never to scribble anything down on paper or on a computer again. They had notes to remind themselves of and things to dive into. Other times, when they had no choice but to take notes, they were constantly monitored. When they were finished using them, they would burn them and dispose of the dust in a safe location. They also agreed to never make calls from numbers that may be traced back to them. They couldn't tell anyone else about it. Most importantly, they couldn't be found hanging out together in public until this was ended. Saying farewell was the most difficult thing. Even though they'd only been friends for 5 days, they felt close. It was difficult to realize they had to stay apart to avoid drawing attention. Ryan returned to his lodging, and Consuela went to sleep after ensuring Belinda's safety. When the little one woke up in the morning and Ryan was gone, she was heartbroken. On Saturday afternoon, Ryan discovered additional evidence of Carrie's infidelity. He wouldn't have bothered, but he needed to confirm the time of their hookups. He wasn't aiming for the average or longest amount of time he and Consuela spent together. He was curious about how short their conversation would be. After watching, he calculated that Consuela would have roughly 25 minutes each time to execute her magic. Carrie and Shawn were never together for less than 30 minutes, and only once was it that quick. Ryan reasoned that if he and Consuela restricted their visits to 25 minutes, they'd avoid being detected. That offered them a 5-minute safety net in the garage. He threw all the tapes, cameras, and recorders into a box. He placed the box on the passenger side of his vehicle. Carrie hadn't gone near the truck in over a year, so it was an ideal location to hide anything. On Sunday, he drove to Austin and purchased 6 inexpensive phones. Ryan and Consuela would use them to communicate while pretending otherwise. They couldn't be followed, so he bought in cash at various local shops to keep it a mystery. Before entering the stores, he checked to make sure there were no cameras. He either grinned briefly or maintained a cool demeanor and was pleasant to everyone. Nobody would think twice about a man in normal clothes. Over the weekend, Carrie was either frigid or simply ignored him. Ryan was fine with it. He didn't want to stay around her longer than necessary, and he didn't want to sleep with her at all. She got a lot of sleep that weekend. Ryan assumed she was simply weary and left her alone to relax. He was excited about what he and Consuela had planned for Carrie and Mr. Shawn Michaels on Monday night at her aunt's house. Consuela summoned her great-uncle, Roberto, and asked her aunt to leave the room. Her aunt wanted to know what was going on, but she was willing to wait. She expected to find out one day. Great-uncle Roberto rarely answered calls from unknown numbers, but after speaking with Consuela, he was prepared for any call from 6 specific numbers. Consuela ended the call with typical family talk, as she normally did with him. Ryan drove to her house one late day in a car borrowed from his co-worker. The guy required his large truck to transport goods from San Antonio on Tuesday, and even recommended this swap. Ryan believed that he and Consuela should use rental cars for their visits. He didn't know how to prevent leaving a trail of card payments, but he had some ideas. Perhaps charge the rental to a credit card and then pay in cash or leave a large cash deposit. He would figure something out. Belinda was relieved when her mother left her with Ryan to visit her aunts. Ryan enjoyed it too. When Consuela returned and entered softly, she found her daughter in Ryan's arms, both sleeping in a large chair. She watched them for a time, allowing her tears to dry before waking them up. Consuela was busy the following week, speaking with her great-uncle whenever she could. He was also calling people he knew in Belize, the Cayman Islands, Barbados, Bermuda, Antigua, Curaçao, Aruba, Jamaica, and other countries Consuela was unfamiliar with. They soon established accounts in secure offshore banks. Some accounts were ancient but underused, while others were freshly new. When everything was ready, Roberto devised a strategy to move money. It would first flow through a London bank, then to the Swiss Credit Bank, then to the Bank of Nigeria, and lastly back to the Caribbean. He opened multiple accounts since he knew his great-niece's scheme wouldn't last. There was no time for money to grow, and no way for routine bank transactions to occur quickly. A little more than a week later, great-uncle Roberto had everything set up. A joyful young kid came to Consuela's home and handed her a CD. She was stunned, but as she looked up, she grabbed the CD case. The boy had left without saying a word. The CD contained a list that Consuela and Ryan had loaded onto an old laptop that Ryan had purchased for cash. They couldn't remember all of those accounts, so they had one unsafe thing with them. They destroyed the CD by breaking and melting it, then flung it into the San Antonio River. To avoid detection, they expected to leave the money in an account for several years. This was no big thing. They had always intended to litigate in their preferred manner. They were confident they could win those suits. Their purpose was to attack the bank and make it pay for not obeying its own regulations. By removing money from extremely wealthy people's accounts, they made it appear as if Shawn Michaels and Carrie Gilchrist were running a hoax. The time they'd spend in jail was better than in the past, when things were far worse in this town. Ryan and Consuela assumed the bank would compensate the wealthy to keep them satisfied. The bank could not risk losing such consumers. Those wealthy individuals would undoubtedly battle for their money back. The bank would have to bear the costs of another mess. This time, they'd learnt not to allow a manager harass a single mother or flirt with another employee's wife at work. Consuela is an older cousin once removed. Richard would keep the laptop for them when they completed their great plan. Richard knew little about computers and didn't care. He was a loner, with no friends. He seldom spoke with his own relatives. He lived in a cabin with no modern amenities, hiding behind a large rock hill far out where even the farmhands didn't venture. He constructed his home there because the landowner owed him one from 20 years ago. Nobody really knew what it was for. Consuela and Ryan were mainly concerned about Richard's location, which was remote. Nobody could sneak up on him. Visitors had to call out their identities from a distance or risk being shot. They were confident that the laptop would be safe because Richard and Consuela had convinced Ryan of this, approximately a month and a half after Ryan and Consuela hooked up. Everything was set. The bank accounts were ready. The first set of burn phones they used to communicate were shattered to pieces and scattered all around San Antonio. Ryan disposed of all the spy equipment and recordings by burning them and dumping the ashes far away. They burned all of their notes and threw the ashes into the river south of town. They've been in the garage where he keeps the books, was currently vacant. He disposed of everything inside. He did not want it to stand out, so he scrubbed the entire garage with a lot of cleanser and worked hard. They were as prepared as they could be. Their idea was for Ryan to stay at home for a few weeks, to disrupt the covert meetings. He took time off work, telling Carrie he needed to rest after working so hard. She couldn't truly refuse. Ryan was very kind all week. He paid frequent visits to Carrie at the bank, either for lunch or to chat for a few minutes during her break. On Friday night, they attended a lavish dinner at a hotel along the Riverwalk. It was an occasion for bank employees after summer, but before the holidays. Ryan didn't attend last year. He didn't particularly like Carrie's coworkers, but this year he was looking forward to it. Carrie tried to persuade him out of it, but Ryan insisted on going. He surprised her with a gorgeous suit he bought for the night, and he looked great. He even went to the barber shop and shaved cleanly. She observed his nails were in good condition and remarked it at his job. It was difficult to keep nails nice. Ryan kept close to Carrie at the dance, despite her attempts to urge him to mix with others. He smiled to himself as she presented him to Shawn Michaels again. Ryan was already aware of his identity. It was interesting to see Carrie gaze into the man's eyes and grip his hand tightly when she presented him to Shawn and his companions. The way his eyes became larger and the suggestion of agony as Ryan squeezed hard made the fancy suit worthwhile. Ryan hadn't realized how much taller he was than Mr. Michaels until that point. Michaels clearly disliked it. Carrie didn't seem pleased with how different the two men appeared. Ryan quickly left Carrie's side, but he was not alone for long. Many women, single or not, had watched Ryan grasp Michael's hand and wanted to be closer to the man who came out on top. Carrie looked furious when she saw him across the room with 3 women, all vying for his attention. Carrie became even more concerned when Ryan resumed talking to Shawn's wife, Sharon. They had previously met at another occasion, but hadn't seen each other since then. Sharon, a lovely blonde, spoke with Ryan for a while. Toward the end, something behind Ryan caught her attention. He looked back and saw Carrie standing near Shawn, gazing up at him. They were among a crowd. Sharon kept a tight eye on things, even if nothing seemed amiss. Ryan returned his gaze to Sharon and noticed a frown fading. Her eyes were filled with sadness, which she could not hide. Ryan wasn't sure what to do. He didn't know her well enough to discuss his thoughts. He wasn't sure how she'd react, and this was not the time or place for it. All the pretended interest in being with Carrie. Ryan perceived it as a show and part of a trap, which slowed down in the second week. It had finished its duty. Carrie and Michaels were so nervous they didn't even bother to meet because they were afraid Ryan might appear out of nowhere. Ryan returned to the bank a couple times, just as he had the week before, to keep Carrie and Michaels on edge. However, he made brief visits because he had other obligations. It works. By the conclusion of the second week, Carrie was plainly upset and anxious. Shawn seemed to feel the same way, not pleased at all. Ryan and Consuela were satisfied with themselves. They had everything set up perfectly. It was even easier than Ryan expected to sneak into the house on the day Carrie and Shawn agreed to meet, which happened to be Shawn's first day back at work. Ryan had accurately predicted the time they would leave work that afternoon. He accomplished this by taking Carrie out for lunch early. On Sunday, he promised to pick her up on his way to a business meeting in Austin. She said yes. She couldn't truly refuse. Ryan claimed she chose a Taco Bell near the bank for lunch. Ryan believed she wanted a quick lunch so he could get on the road quickly. That was fine with him. He merely wanted to ensure that she and Shawn couldn't leave work in the morning. This eliminated the need for Ryan and Consuela to spend the entire day waiting for them to arrive at the Gilchrist home. Instead of renting an automobile, Ryan and Consuela used her family's simple cars. They were in Consuelo's cousin Alfredo's automobile for the remainder of the week. They would drive different cars every day from members in Consuela's family and friends. Consuela had spoken with a number of people she trusted. Every morning at 7 a.m., she had her car ready to drive, parked in a quiet location with keys waiting beneath the mat. Consuela and Ryan were both unaware of Ryan's involvement, despite the fact that Consuela was his aunt. I could use the automobile all day. When they returned it, they'd dropped some $20 bills in an envelope beneath the mat for the car. Ryan told his top employees that no one had asked or told them anything. He was headed to his old deer stand near the small town of Marble Falls. He did this every year around the same time for some hunting, so no one thought it was strange, even though he had been off work for a couple weeks prior. There wasn't enough money for such a long break. Everyone simply wished him luck with his hunts. Consuela wasn't feeling well and told her boss it could be the bug going about, or worse, the flu, because she hadn't received her vaccine. She was hoped to feel well quickly, perhaps in a day or two. Her boss hoped she would feel well soon. While waiting at a little BBQ joint, Ryan and Consuela talked about anything came to mind. They discovered that they enjoyed simply sitting there, talking and spending time together for whatever reason. I started to feel unique to them. Ryan left one bug behind, a listening device buried in the back of a small table near the entryway. It was their way of knowing when Carrie and her employer arrived. Consuela had went into the BBQ restaurant and emerged with a bag of pulled pork sandwiches. She and Ryan each had a few. Ryan was still hungry from his fast lunch with Carrie, but the true reason for purchasing those was to provide a plausible justification for their plane car to be in the eat-out lot. Finally, Ryan stated, checking the time. He assumed his wife and Michael had had enough time to make up their lies. After eating, sneak out for some covert fun. The sound of a key in the door lock could be heard clearly through the speaker on the dashboard. The happy voices immediately after it made it. Sure, Carrie and her secret pal had arrived soon. Consuela and Ryan got out of their large gray Ford. They had to move quickly yet cautiously, looking around to see if anyone was observing. Ryan took Consuela through the small trees and dense bushes to the west of the eating establishment. These trees and plants ended directly behind Ryan's house. They had discussed wearing black and possibly masks, but quickly discarded the idea. Everyone would notice if they appeared to want to be ninjas. Instead, they chose a wig to conceal Consuelos' true hair color, as well as simple used baseball hats, dark glasses, and unobtrusive clothing. They wore mellow greens, browns, and dark grays. Their shoes were plain and dark. The shoe sizes they received for this work varied greatly. Some days they'd wear 2 tight shoes for a short time. Other times they wore additional socks and 2 large shoes. All they wore was clean, but it appeared used, picked up at Salvation Army and Goodwill locations in Austin, Dallas, and Houston. They purchased nothing close to home. They possessed 6 sets of these. They expected to require 5 pairs, but packed an extra one each day after wearing them. They planned to burn all of the clothing and shoes. Metal zips, small metal components, buttons, and sunshades were thrown deep into various lakes in the region. It took only 10 minutes, maybe a little longer, to get past the dense vegetation and little trees. They could have proceeded faster, but Ryan took Consuela on a circuitous path to avoid leaving any evidence. It was simple to stick to hard soil or rock places where their footsteps would not be seen. They intended to return in the same manner, with Ryan wiping away whatever evidence they had left. This path was intended to be used only once. They left nothing to chance. They put on their disposable rubber gloves near the edge of the woods. They evaluated how they looked to ensure that their simple disguises were still intact. Ryan offered Consuela a thumbs up, and she returned the gesture with a troubled smile. They climbed over the fence and walked directly to the back door. They did not rush. Their walk was made to appear normal. They gazed around, black spectacles on. Nobody was looking out from the house they were about to enter, or the one next to it. When they entered the yard, towering bushes kept them well hidden from any neighbors who might have been observing. Ryan swiftly opened the back door, which he knew well. He was correct in his estimate that Carrie had not locked up after arriving home at midday. They shut the glass door silently behind them. He and Consuela stepped to the side, out of sight of anyone outside, and stood close. They barely breathed for a moment. Ryan checked his watch and showed it to Consuela. They had planned to leave the house by 26 minutes, done or not. She nodded. Ryan started the stopwatch and allowed his arm to hang. They paused and listened. They were new to this. Their hearts were in their throats since they got out of the automobile. Their bodies were filled with adrenaline, and their hearts were racing. They needed this chance to concentrate. The sounds from upstairs indicated that the two were already busy. The sound of skin hitting skin was audible. "Oh God, Shawn!" Carrie yelled. "Do it! It has been so long, sweetheart!" Ryan's face was all lines. He froze in the kitchen doorway. His wrath over Carrie's second cheat had subsided over the last few months as he and Consuela devised their plot. Hearing the two lovers, the rage surged back. He was about to take a step towards the stairs when Consuela, with a touch on his arm, stopped him. He gazed at her. She raised her brows, asking without words. They had promised to maintain silence until they were back in the car. Her touch soothed him a little. Ryan gave her a stiff nod and a faint grin, attempting to control his wrath. He took a deep breath. It was difficult, but he remained firm, waiting for any sign that his wife and Michael's would come downstairs. He checked. Nope. He wasn't turned on. His wife's actions upstairs did not elicit the basic response he expected. He'd won over it. He offered his companion a wide smile and nodded. Consuela, feeling Shawn now, peered around the living room, noticed the laptop on the couch, and tiptoed across the room. Carpet. Ryan had shown her how to walk silently, like the Comanche had done in the past when hunting or sneaking up on opponents. After 2 weeks of testing, you couldn't hear her footsteps on a noisy wood floor. Ryan smiled widely. Consuela took the laptop into the kitchen and sat down. She was on the bank website entering Michael's password. They were a little stunned. It works. Shawn Michaels objected to the bank's requirement to change his password every 2 months. He never did. With a smile for Ryan, Consuela placed a paper of account details from Great-Uncle Roberto next to the laptop. These papers and the clothes they were wearing were to be burned tonight. They kept the information safe on Cousin Richard's laptop, with a backup with Great-Uncle Roberto. They also placed additional printouts in Ryan's pickup for future covert bank jobs that week. Consuela got busy looking for accounts of extremely wealthy people who trusted Shawn Michaels and Carrie Gilchrist with their money. Her fingers rushed about, typing quickly. Back in the car, they burst out laughing. They laughed at each other's jokes, even if they weren't particularly humorous. Consuela repeatedly touched Ryan's hand and arm. They had to. They just did something really horrible together. They needed to feel connected and keep calm. Soon the rush subsided, and they were silent. Her hand remained in his for comfort as what they'd done struck them hard. When it was time to transfer vehicles, holding hands just felt good. They left the BBQ area quickly, taking care to drive slowly and carefully along a route they had planned a week before. It was difficult, but they discovered a route across the city that avoided all of the cameras on the streets or in areas they suspected might have them but couldn't see with their plane, car, wigs, hats, dark glasses, and basic clothes. They assumed no one would notice them, even if people watched footage of every house and shop they passed. They kept their caps low and covered their faces out of fear that someone would notice them. When they returned to where they had left their automobiles, they stripped down to their underwear and placed everything they had used that day in a large garbage bag. Ryan loaded the luggage into the back of his pickup. They were a little shy in only their underwear in front of each other, because it was their first time, but neither showed it. Each felt the other was cool, attentive, and unconcerned about their appearance. They dressed quickly and split up. Consuela went to pick up Belinda from daycare, while Ryan hurried to his cottage in the hills near Marble Falls. Tonight, he intended to burn everything in the bag and then look for any metal objects, such as buttons, in the ash at daybreak. He'd get into his 16-foot boat, which was kept ready beside the lake, and drop the ash and bits into the deep areas. Who knows, he might even catch a base for breakfast. But the important thing was that no trace of what he and Consuela had been up to would be left. By the time Friday came around, it was just normal for Ryan and Carrie. It was nearly dull. They had to continuously reminding one another to be vigilant with their safety precautions. They'd parked their car in different locations near the BBQ every day, since it was the ideal method to sneak into the bush without being noticed. Their clothes and the manner they walked ensured that no one noticed they were the same duo all week. Shawn Michaels and Carrie Gilchrist managed to sneak away to the Gilchrist home every day of the week. They met at different times, but always in the same house. Ryan found it unfortunate that Shawn never considered renting a motel room for a change of scenery. The guy was stingy, that's all there was to say about him. Consuela reasoned that expressing anything else about the guy would make her feel worse sadder by Friday. Ryan and Consuela spent significantly less time changing into their costumes than they did on Monday. They parked near the BBQ area and walked there together, without pausing. Ryan removed the earpiece from his ear and placed it in his pocket. The two sheriff's cars in the lot were most likely there because the cops were inside eating a large dish of ribs. There were no cops in the vicinity, and there was no evidence of a major crime taking place at the restaurant or in the neighboring woods. People strolled by without taking a second look. Nobody cared or followed, but none of this was actually important. "Will we leave?" Ryan murmured a block away. Consuela did not recognize the phrase, but she understood what he meant. She nodded. Tiny, her large bush had hidden her face in the corner. She looked back, pretending to check for automobiles. "No one is coming," she whispered softly. "It's all clear." Ryan emphasized the importance of caution. "It is a sign," Consuela stated with assurance. Ryan did not doubt her. They strolled carefully around the block to the vehicle they were driving today, got in, and drove away. They loaded their last bag with the clothes they took off, even the ones they didn't wear, and put it in Ryan's truck. He hid an envelope containing $300 under the car seat. There was no mat there, and swiftly drove away, exchanging a short kiss they both desperately needed. They rushed more than usual. They tried to convince themselves that nothing had changed from yesterday, but the sight of those cop cars scared them. They were relieved to be finished with this part. Ryan picked out an insect from near the door the next day, after pretending to return from a non-existent hunting excursion. He smashed it on the garage floor and collected each piece. He placed them in a garbage bag and threw them away in various bins throughout town that night. That same Saturday night, an hour after receiving a call from Consuela, Great-Uncle Roberto began spreading the word that on Monday, persons who appeared so ordinary that they blended in began draining accounts using secret codes. The banks believed that only the true owners could know. They received cashier's checks, sometimes cash, and went to other banks to deposit the money, as instructed. Other accounts soon became fat with cashier's checks, which were subsequently emptied as quickly as the bank computers could process them. By the following day, no account had any money remaining. Every financial transaction since then has been made in cash. A steady stream of tiny monetary payments, mostly in US dollars, begin sneaking into Roberto's special accounts in secret banks. 3 weeks passed with no one making a fuss. Ryan was confident that once trouble started, news would spread quickly. It had to be the most significant event in the region's banking history. He knew this because when Consuela totaled everything up, they discovered they had transferred roughly $9 million out of the country into concealed accounts. That money had long since vanished from the location where it was first sent, and those investigating it would soon come to a dead end. Tracking the funds beyond the first or second move was going to be difficult. The men and ladies who had shifted the money from one location to another had completed their tasks and vanished. They had blended back into the crowd in several Caribbean towns, storing their elegant clothing for the next time they would be required, even if they were discovered and forced to speak. They couldn't say who had told them what to do. Others, equally difficult to identify, had issued the orders before disappearing into the crowd. By the third and fourth time the money was shifted, no one knew where it went. There were too many stages to complete. The cash simply vanished into the massive pile of money floating around Caribbean banks. The banks in Cayman Islands alone have more than $800 billion, and the other offshore banks have a same amount. Dropping $9 million in didn't even cause a ripple. Small parts were removed. It didn't really matter, even after everyone had received their part and Great-Uncle Roberto had taken his cut. Over $7 million remained. That was sufficient for Ryan and Consuela. The bank was hammered heavily. They realized it was a significant loss. The money began to show up in Mexico City. Roberto conducted normal account activities. The number was staggering, especially since Consuela had to keep each transfer under $10,000. They didn't want to raise red flags by having to fill out those lengthy procedures for moving more than $10,000 at once. Consuela even set up a slew of automatic transfers that ran themselves after she logged out. After the first day, this strategy handled the majority of the workload. It was all extremely easy. It's remarkable what a single login and a 12-character password can do. Surely when someone figured it out, there'd be problems in the business world. It was simply a waiting game. Ryan and Consuela carried on with their normal routines, just waiting. "Hi," said in a thin voice. The inexpensive phones lacked high-quality components. "How are you?" Ryan responded. He knew it was Consuela, even though her voice sounded strange due to the low phone quality. They enjoy chatting each night. A little link, yet important to them. "Good. Very good. You," she spoke back. "I'm okay, I just can't wait. But it's fine," Ryan shared. That was all he would say. They stayed silent about the large bank heist in Texas to which they were related. This time he drove southeast through town, far from his business and home. Yesterday, the call came from a location near him. They were astute, making sure their calls did not appear unusual, avoiding the same areas too frequently. She responded, "Me too," and then went quiet, with some noise behind her. "Hello, Mr. Ryan." Ryan smiled a little. "Hello, Belinda." "How about it?" he asked quietly. "Okay," the small one spoke. "When will you come to see me?" She missed him. Ryan hadn't had a reason to go to her mother's house in quite some time. "I think I'll be there on Sunday," he told her. On Monday, he worked in that small town examining stores for a huge job. He informed his wife that he would depart early to examine them. Carrie was all right with it. She enjoyed the space. He and the 4-year-old talked longer. He liked it. She felt big since he didn't speak down to her. They were both excited about his surprise Sunday visit. "Are you still there?" Consuela took back the phone from her daughter. Ryan laughed. When Consuela received her phone back, he understood what she had said. Belinda was angry she lost her phone. "Yep," he said. "I believe she needs a trip to Baskin-Robbins for an ice cream cone or something, on Sunday." Belinda loved it. Baskin-Robbins. Consuela stated something out loud that was so Belinda could hear. "I am not sure. Has she performed well enough for that?" The noise behind her abruptly ceased. Ryan laughed again. They both went quiet for a while. "Last night I watched a really cool TV show." Consuela dismissed it as a minor issue. "Oh," Ryan said. "Yes, on Channel 16, she said at 10 p.m. It airs every worknight at the same hour." "What is it called?" Ryan wanted to know. They chatted a lot, but Consuela was ambiguous. He had a strange feeling. "It's called Busted, and I believe they film it in Dallas. Or perhaps Houston." She replied, sounding hesitant. "Oh, what is this about?" he pressed. "I believe you should watch it and see what you think," Consuela remarked, avoiding the topic. She plainly didn't want to discuss anything over the phone. Ryan stopped asking and said he'd watch the show. They talked a little more before hanging up. Ryan encountered bad traffic. They would meet in 2 days. It needed to wait till then. He closed the door to his study and watched television. There was no sound upstairs, and he had a new comfortable chair. Carrie might not even have noticed it. She rarely visited places where he was likely to be. Carrie had gone to bed early again, this time due to one of her regular headaches. He could tell she was scared about Ryan not wanting CC, but she wasn't concerned enough to act on it. For the time being, she was content with simply being safe with Ryan. Shawn Michaels showed her the love and attention she needed in various ways. She felt like she had everything she desired. The television series began with a story about a detective agency in Houston. Ryan was unfamiliar with the agency, but that was fine. The episode they watched was taped in Austin and told the story of a young woman who thought her boyfriend, the father of their new baby, was acting strangely and without concern. She felt he was seeing someone else and sought the TV show Busted to confirm her suspicions. Her guy had another girlfriend and was cheating. The host showed her videos of her lover being close and entering a motel with another woman. After she cried and became upset, the host drove her and the TV crew to a location where the boyfriend and his new girl were eating outside. When the boyfriend noticed the cameras, he appeared stunned. He couldn't say anything and instead absorbed a lot of furious comments from his girlfriend and the other women. The host stated that they will inform viewers what happened next. The following story was about a man in Houston who suspected his wife was cheating with someone from her gym. This plot was very similar to the first, with just minor differences in characters and details. The end credits revealed that the pie firm on TV would assist anyone for free if they used their case on the show. Ryan was certain of his next move after spending an additional 10 minutes thinking about it. He reached for the phone and dialed the number on the screen. In the morning, he'd meet with a lawyer to explain that he believed his wife was lying and had asked TV detectives to investigate. He was quite sure what they'd find. The lengthy wait was nearly over. The night was dark, and storm clouds formed far to the northwest. A large storm was brewing over the hills, about to hit the city below. It was still warm because the autumn had been moderate, with pleasant days and cool evenings. People wore lightweight jackets or just shirts with rain gear nearby. The show's host motioned to the woman holding the camera. She stood strong, feet apart. Be careful not to lock her knees. She was aware that keeping knees locked could cause people to faint out and fall over, as she had seen happen previously. She was startled to learn that even soldiers are instructed not to lock their knees for the same reason. When Ryan was ready, the host drew him closer so they could both fit in the frame. He started speaking. He was disappointed they had to summon Ryan back early from his trip. They had information on his wife. He was sorry, but he had to inform Ryan that his wife had actually broken her marital vows. Ryan appeared depressed. He thought he performed well, but he wanted to make sure everything was fine. He turned and walked away from the host and camera for a while. For a moment, all that could be seen was his wide back. Ryan cleared his throat and returned to the host, not wanting to push the issue. He gently nodded. Yes. When the host asked if he was comfortable with watching the footage, he produced the little cameras that the show's investigators trained him to put up in his room, which were quite good. The videos of his wife with another man were quite clear, much better than the ones he shot on his own. As he looked at the small digital camera screen, Ryan pulled on his recently growing beard. To make himself stand out, he sported a beard and a fine mustache. He wore them with a Texas Rangers baseball cap, so the spy gear shop guy in Dallas wouldn't recognize him. It was one of several things he and Consuela had done recently to keep their secrets hidden. The beard and mustache also helped mask his identity from the people in the little town not far from San Antonio. He and Consuela hadn't been spotted together in a few months, but it was still prudent to exercise caution. The host knew Ryan was fine with watching the footage. The producer, who had called Ryan in Memphis 2 days previously, apologized but asked Ryan to come on Friday evening when they could bring a full camera team to San Antonio. Ryan promised the producer over the phone that he would be there and agreed to being videotaped. As he viewed the disturbing clip, Ryan's meeting in Memphis was not very significant. In truth, he only left town so Carrie felt free to do whatever she wanted. He agreed to returning home quickly. When the show host was about to pose the big question, he told Ryan that he'd pitch the one about getting answers from his late wife. Ryan had a quick, brilliant thought. He flashed wild signs at the camera and the show's host. Hold on, I have a plan. Ryan's irritated expression on the show guy and the boss changed to a smile as he conveyed his thought. They knew he had seen Shawn Michaels in those clips. He mentioned that on air. They did not. I guess Ryan knew Michaels' wife well enough to call her up. Their smiles widened when he suggested dialing her up for the big talk, as they called it. Ryan received a phone that was already open. Mrs. Michaels, Ryan started. Yes, a wary woman replied. Sharon, this is Ryan Gilchrist, he said, trying to remain cool. Oh, hello, Ryan, she answered. No, wait. Despite the fact that they hadn't spoken in a long time, he recognized his name. Nonetheless, she did not appear thrilled. Ryan went right to the heart of it. There will be no sweet talk, Sharon. I'm sorry to bring this up with you, but your man and my woman have been sneaking around. He explained clearly. A sharp breath in was audible, but Sharon remained silent at first. Sharon? Ryan interrupted the silence. Yes, I am still here, she returned with a heavy voice. How long have you known? She finally asked. I had speculated for a long, but tonight I saw it clearly. Ryan informed her he was prepared for such a question, offering a vague but appropriate response. I get it, Sharon. Michael expressed unease. It's not a complete shock. She exhaled heavily. Curse him, she said gently. Sharon, there is more. Ryan found the following thing difficult to bring up. I'll simply say it, he concluded. Sharon, I am here with a TV team from a show in Houston, and we are going to surprise them on their date at that restaurant by the river. There was a long silence on the other side. Oh, wow. Sharon finally spoke, then erupted into laughter. You are going to tamper with my foolish hubby? She laughed harder. He deserved it. The fool. Yeah. Sharon, I've got to be honest. I'm going to wreck him and my wife tonight. Ryan declared. "I don't see him keeping his job, and I apologize for how that affects you." There was a pause. "Don't worry about it," Sharon responded. "He's got a great bargain. If they let him leave, he'll get a large paycheck." "I'll make sure I get mine and then some," she said. "Ha!" Ryan laughed out loud, feeling happy. "I understand, but hey, Sharon, one last thing. Would you like to join us and really shake things up?" Double problem. Sharon remained silent for a bit longer. "I hadn't considered that. I don't want to be everywhere. You know what? That is exactly what I need." "Yeah, I'm in." "Where are you now?" "I'll pass you along to the producer who will give you the details," Ryan stated. She agreed, and Ryan gave the phone to the producer, who immediately resolved everything. When she came, they would ask her permission to use her voice and face on television. Then she'd get a small microphone like Ryan's pinned to her. The battery pack attached to his belt was somewhat large. He reminded himself not to lean back on anything hard. There were 4 large cameras, each of which appeared to be operated by 3 persons. Aside from the person holding the hefty video camera, someone had to help them move around by pulling on their garments or supporting them at the waist. They ensured that the camera crew could keep their focus on what they were capturing. The third person held a large boom mic, lifting it to capture all of the words spoken in front of the camera. A group of men and 2 women known as licensed private eyes were present, along with the cameras and the host. They were nearly as numerous as the subjects being filmed. The host continued calling for security and detectives. Before anything began, the show's boss spoke with the club manager. She'd seen the show before and appreciated the buzz it would generate. She was all for it. Excited customers meant more drinks sold, which was excellent for business. She informed the club's bouncers and directed them to remain out of the way. She also made it easier for the camera teams to enter through a side door by turning off the alarm that would normally sound. This allowed them to quickly move to a table near the dance floor. The host and Ryan rushed into the club. The camera crews and guides were following on Ryan's heels, ready to capture the action they knew was coming. When the club's members noticed them, they cheered loudly. But the pair at a side table didn't notice them. Carrie's back was turned, and Shawn Michaels was chatting to a waitress in a short dress and signing what appeared to be a bill. Carrie startled in her seat and looked around quickly. She was blinded by a dazzling light and could not see anything. "Hey, Carrie, what is going on?" Ryan called out. He tried not to sound mean. It was hard. He had waited until this day. Carrie's mouth dropped open. Her eyes grew huge. She was more surprised now than when Ryan discovered her with Marshall years ago. "Carrie, this is Johnny Waterfield from the TV show Busted." The host stated that she stared at him and did not understand what he was saying. She didn't seem to realize he was there. "What?" she said softly, but the microphone caught it. "Can you explain to Ryan why you're here with this man? We're simply pals." She spoke in a tense voice. "No, this is not true," Johnny answered back. "We have a video of you and Mr. Michaels together at your home," he continued. "What have you got to say?" She shakes her head. Her eyes became wild. She felt trapped, surrounded by people and cameras. She could only stare at the camera. She couldn't look away. "We're simply pals." She spoke again. "We are simply out for drinks." "And is this so?" Ryan yelled. "Just friends." "How about we chat to another friend?" he remarked, pointing past our shoulders. "Meet Sharon," he added in a gruff tone. Ryan expected to have to pretend, but he didn't need to. He was quite upset over his wife's infidelity. He'd put up with it for so long. Everything felt great to let everything out. Sharon Michaels snuck behind the table and stole a large jug of beer from another table. When the camera centered on her, she poured the beer over her spouse. Carrie's bright white shirt was virtually see-through after drinking so much cold drink. This segment would be blurred in the final performance, but Ryan and everyone else could tell she wasn't wearing a bra. He shook his head when he saw her short skirt and tall, pointy heels. Another camera team was on the other side of the table and captured his unhappy expression. "Just right." "Do you have panties on?" Ryan replied with a snarl. He didn't wait for her to respond and lifted her skirt to reveal that she was not wearing any. The crowd, or those who were close enough to see it, cheered loudly. It was an image that needed to be blurred, but viewers of the final presentation could figure out what was missing. Carrie hurried quickly to pull her skirt back down. She attempted to hide by sliding her legs under the table across from her. Shawn Michaels was still attempting to get the beer out of his eyes. He had not said anything yet. His eyes were large in a pale face. Despite his silence, he kept gazing back and forth between the camera and his upset wife. Sharon yelled at him. "What have you got to say?" she yelled. "Come on, talk, you jerk! What exactly are you doing here with her?" The audience became increasingly enthusiastic and noisy. The show's creator was really pleased. This required a lot of cuts, but it would be the best show he'd done in a while. Sharon grabbed her husband's earlobe and yanked him out of his chair. She started heading for the door, and everyone else followed. Carrie stood up and tried to move, but it was difficult in her tall shoes. The crowd didn't make things simple for her, and some men took the opportunity to touch her as she passed. She hadn't even noticed. Once outside, the TV crew tracked her every move as she rushed down the sidewalk. She then realized she was traveling in the incorrect direction and had to turn back towards her parked car. Passing the club again made those waiting outside even more excited. The rain had caused her clothes to clump together and her makeup to run. Her hair lay flat against her head. She dashed into an alley and found a place to catch her breath. "I can't believe it," she exclaimed out of breath. The show host and camera team remained with her. "What can't you believe, Carrie?" asked Johnny, the host. "Would you like to discuss why you've been seeing another guy behind your husband's back?" He'd probably like to know. "I can't believe he would make me appear that awful," Carrie yelled out. Johnny was stunned for a time and at a loss for words. "Don't you think you were the one who made things worse, Carrie?" He eventually spoke. Carrie didn't respond. She might not have heard him. She tried to go past the host and continued down the alleyway. When she went to her car, her hands were so shaky that she couldn't get her keys out of her handbag or open the door. Johnny took her keys and opened the door for her. She tried several times to free them from his grip until he finally let go. She didn't respond. His questions were met with nods. No. Ryan's knock on the window was audible. "Hey, love," he joked. "Why the rush? The fans aren't done. Look what I have for you." Ryan's lawyer had been on call since the following day when he called the TV team. But the papers waited, and Ryan's file was ready to appear at the appropriate time. I received a call from the producer 2 days ago. Ryan persuaded his lawyer to move. Ryan had signed the divorce papers, which were currently in court. Ryan had to arrange a special meeting, which was taking place right now. Ryan stepped aside for the older man in a cowboy suit, and a fancy light had to be placed at the door. The short, thin man flashed Carrie a badge and ID that suggested he was more than a private investigator. Ryan had paid, but the badge appeared authentic. She appeared lost for a moment. Then, at his gesture, she rolled down the window. "Carrie, Denise, Gilchrist." He inquired as if it were official. She nodded yes. He removed a pack of papers from his coat and placed them in her hands. He quickly answered, "You are served," and backed away. He smelled. Sure, he'd get sick from being out here. He opened his umbrella and headed to where his car was. The camera caught him, but it did not appear when they presented the story. Later, Carrie still had the documents. She appeared astonished and unconcerned. "Carrie?" Ryan yelled. She gazed at him. He snarled, "Don't even think about going home!" 20 minutes after you left tonight to meet your friend, I changed the locks on all of the doors. I hired movers to pack up your belongings from the closet. It will arrive at your parents' place soon. I do not care where you go, Carrie. I loved you, but that love is gone. You destroyed it, and it will never return. Do not call. Do not write. Do not try to contact me in any way. I get it," he said sharply. "I do not want to see you, hear from or about you. You are nothing to me. I should have kicked you out when you initially cheated. Simply seeing you makes me nauseous." He looked like he was about to puke up. He couldn't find any more words. He turned and walked away, leaving his soon-to-be ex-wife in disbelief. The camera team dashed to pursue him. It seems out the cameras lost them for a bit. Later, it was discovered that she had gotten a cab before entering the club and taken him home. Sharon's ranting at him continued until early in the morning, according to neighbors. A week later, the show's crew arrived to see if they were still together. She compelled Shawn to sign a document so that the show could utilize his image. The show's producers speculated that he may not have fully understood what he was signing. He had no choice but to do as his wife desired. When Sharon offered him a pen, he simply signed wherever she directed. Ryan went home and shaved his mustache and beard. He didn't need them anymore. Ryan hired another lawyer who went to the bank the next morning. He sat in a large, beautiful office where the senior executives worked. When John Harrison, the bank's manager, stepped in and saw Carlton J. London sat there with 3 of his legal assistants, Harrison knew him well. They both enjoyed art and volunteered at nonprofits in San Antonio. London also has some of the top lawyers around. He appeared sharp and was known to be very strong, both in court and when riding horses on his ranch near Abilene. Harrison became concerned when he learned that London was there for Mr. Ryan Gilchrist, Mrs. Carrie's spouse and Shawn Michaels' employee. Mr. Gilchrist was suing the bank because it failed to follow its own regulations for proper behavior. Mr. Gilchrist claimed that the bank allowed his wife to have an affair with a lower-level manager and attempted to conceal it. Even though both of them had contracts requiring them to conduct morally, he believed the bank made it simpler for his marriage to dissolve after some discussion. Mr. London asked to see Mr. Shawn Michaels' job records. He found the head of the personnel department and showed him a slew of legal requests approved by a court that morning. The president gathered all of the large bosses to assess the severity of their predicament. The HR manager had to leave the meeting for a while. He returned terribly shaken. While they were all conversing, a newer member of his team noticed the legal paper on the boss's desk, not realizing the lawyers hadn't seen it yet. This worker had already prepared the records as well as some of Mr. Michaels' personal belongings. London's assistants had used the rapid copier in the junior's office to copy every document in the file. One of London's assistants had left the premises immediately with the copies, while London examined the originals in a tiny meeting room. Was there a way for the HR executive to order security personnel to take the file from London, despite the fact that he had a legal document? Was this all? What about the copies that are already gone from the building? Nobody wanted to look at the HR manager or the bank manager. Suddenly, the phone rang. The youngest of the bosses responded. After listening, he informed the president that London had been shouting terrible comments about Mr. Michaels' job record for quite some time. London now sought the bank's records for any poor behavior reports over the last 2 years. He was talking about obtaining another legal document to make it happen. The young boss inquired whether this was a major deal. 3 bosses all felt sick at the same time. Ryan and Consuela had discussed the TV show as a method to avoid meeting Carrie in court, using Ryan's own tapes. They anticipated that the show would not only benefit Ryan, but would also put Michael's control over the bank's wealth division under scrutiny. And it did. A week after Ryan's lawyer sued the bank, Consuela received a late-night call from a pleased buddy who was still at the bank. The building was nearly completely shut down shortly before midday. The big bosses had a hasty meeting upstairs shortly after they arrived. Since noon, a group of people dressed in crisp suits and carrying large luggage had gone straight to the top floor. Another group in less fine attire arrived just as the doors closed. They appeared formidable, and a bank employee noticed 2 flash FBI badges to go through security. Others wearing various badges followed. No one seemed happy. There was hearsay that the main head of the money teams nearly went crazy, attempting to open a window on the 22nd story. Could Consuela believe this? Her friend pondered. Consuela thanked her and said that she needed to get Belinda to sleep immediately after calling Ryan on a burner phone with the news. They considered deleting their phones, but waited for any indication that they were being monitored. Hearing each other's voices became increasingly important for them. They agreed to use their phones less. It was a wise decision, Mr. Gilchrist, yes. Ryan was partially there, looking at a long list of items rather than the 2 men that entered his office. Special Agent Thomas and Special Agent Williams from the FBI. Can we speak? The taller one inquired. Since you're here, go ahead, Ryan added, eventually glancing up with a concerned expression. He was unhappy with the 2 agents, but not for the reasons they assumed. He wasn't mad that they were here. He was angry. They didn't arrive sooner. Waiting wasn't his thing. He waved his hand. The agents moved their badges closer so he could see. Ryan spoke harshly. No, I don't need to see your badges. I can locate ones similar to those in Walmart's kids area. Show me your authentic IDs. The agents exchanged astonished looks. Few people ask for difficult-to-fake IDs, but they had to display them when requested, so they did. Ryan gazed at them for a moment before picking up the office phone. He found the phone number for the local FBI office. Fast called them and spoke briefly with the head of the San Antonio office. He confirmed that they had 2 agents who matched the characteristics and IDs Ryan provided. Ryan made a little sound, said thank you, and hung up. "Okay," he said, "you are the real deal. What do you need from me?" His face and voice had become more inviting. "Have you ever wondered that someone was a legitimate federal official before Mr. Gilchrist?" the older agent inquired. Ryan nodded. "Yeah. About 2 years and 3 months ago, a person came here and wanted to talk to all of my employees about some anti-bad business stuff. He displayed a badge, confusing my colleagues regarding Rico's identity." Ryan smiled at the memory. "It turns out he was from a union up north. He thought he could terrify me into giving up the place. Unionize by behaving harsh. He's currently incarcerated in a federal facility, according to my understanding. I even spoke at his trial." Ryan was becoming increasingly annoyed by the agent's repeated glances at one another. He wondered if they were even aware they were doing it. Both were certain they noticed a note in Gilchrist's file stating that he had assisted in a large sting a few years prior. The chief agent then spoke a lot of positive things about Gilchrist. "So, who is now in trouble for doing horrible things?" Ryan inquired, wanting to know more. No, responded Special Agent Thomas. "We are on a team formed by the Justice and Treasury Departments. We're investigating into bad money transactions at the bank where your wife used to work." Ryan laughed loudly. "Did you check everything out?" "Don't simply glance at each other. Please answer me," he snapped, stepping back. The 2 agents exchanged another glance before returning their attention to Ryan. They both turned a bit red. Ryan simply shook his head and let out a large sigh. "If you dug into me," he added, hinting at defeat. "You know I won't have a wife after the judge decides what my soon-to-be ex-lawyer wants." He added, "We know that, Mr. Gilchrist. We also learned other things. We know that the divorce is pending the outcome of the criminal case. Look, see, and perhaps file a court case. But we believe you may know something that can help. Have anything to say?" Agent Thomas attempted to appear tough, hoping for a slip-up. Ryan only looked bewildered. "People, I know the word bank. On a good day, I can put down money and laundry with little difficulty, but that is it. How on earth can I assist with what is going on there?" He said, "I haven't heard a peep from there since my wife and I split." Strong. Ryan let out a sigh as he noticed the agents exchanging eyes. This was his first encounter with the cops about bank fraud, and he was not impressed. The FBI agents took a cup of hot, nearly too strong coffee from the urn in the corner and continued questioning Ryan for another 15 minutes. They tried every possible method, but they were unable to obtain any helpful information from him. "What are your thoughts?" Agent Thomas inquired of his friend as they drove away. "I received nothing," Williams responded. "Same here," Thomas stated. "Doesn't the guy appear to be a bit simple? I don't think he's smart enough to participate in this. Not at all." Williams swiftly said that Stan Williams had been with the FBI for 22 years and had seen many different sorts come and go, more than his younger comrade. "Gilchrist is astute. Pay attention to his eyes. If we encounter him again, you will get it. He's clever, but he enjoys it when others don't take him seriously. It works for him," Williams explained, "but I still don't think he's involved in this." Agent Williams noted that the individual only has a BBA and a couple night classes in basic banking from years ago. "I can't picture him being involved in something like this." "Right," Thomas agreed. "Furthermore, he lacks a passport and has no contacts in the Cayman Islands or elsewhere. There was no weird cash, no large bills, and nothing that was causing him to worry about his job or personal circumstances. If he's in this, he's very good." Ryan informed Consuela about the visit that night, using his pay-as-you-go phone. She was nervous, wondering what the agents knew, but Ryan dismissed her concerns. "They were just looking around," he explained. "If they had any idea, they would have asked him specific questions about his employment, where he was when the money went missing, and who he communicated with on those critical days." He told Consuela that he waited for even the smallest sign. They suspected he was tied to her, but nothing turned up. He was certain they didn't ask any inquiries that could lead to her. He made certain of it. He told Consuela that the visit meant nothing. They were simply ticking boxes, so no one could claim they jumped to conclusions too quickly. Ryan and Consuela should only be concerned if they returned with papers to search his office or something. But there was nothing to worry about, he explained. Even if they did return with papers to search, Ryan predicted they would find nothing. What was there to find? Cousin Richard's laptop, concealed 100 miles away, was the sole proof that could get them into trouble. Everything else was destroyed, burned away, and the remnants were tossed into lakes far and wide. Even if they found out something about Consuela, anyone who saw them would assume it was a love affair, especially since Ryan's marriage is going sour. Some customers at the cafe may recall Ryan having breakfast with her a few times, but that was all they knew. Nobody in her family would say anything, and most didn't know anything anyhow. Her aunt set up the cars, and no one else knew. Her aunt would never assist the police. She was still upset with how they treated her son in a DUI case 7 years ago. Overall, he didn't expect anyone to approach Consuela and ask her questions. He pledged to keep any suspicions away from her. The bank's top executives approached Ryan and his lawyer to discuss resolving his case early. Ryan was as calm as a cucumber as he strolled into the bank's meeting room. "Mr. Gilchrist, we believe your claim of being intentionally hurt will not hold up in court, although we agree there were some minor errors in how we handled our personnel and myself." "Mr. Gilchrist, what's going on?" Ryan stood up, adjusting his suit coat and buttoning it. He stared at the bank's counsel, Darren Estrada. "So you're saying my suit doesn't stand properly? That is what you stated, if that's true." "I thought we were finished here. I was about to leave and wait for the judge to set a date." Ryan asked Mr. Estrada if he wanted to speak it over with his lawyer. Estrada inquired, her voice shaking slightly. Ryan looked at his lawyer. Mr. London rose to his feet soon after Ryan. He was astonished but remained calm as Ryan took command. "No need," Ryan replied. "I've known Mr. London for a while now. He has been quite helpful to me since last year." Ryan said, "A really good guy gave me solid advice." "Happy? I see," Estrada said. "So let's get to the point. Do you want to sit, Mr. Gilchrist?" Ryan simply shrugged. "If you are finished wasting our time." "Yeah, okay," Estrada responded, trying to sound happy. "I believe we can finish shortly," he said. "Great," Ryan remarked. "I have to testify at a sexual harassment trial in Dallas this afternoon. If we can move this along quickly, I'd be grateful. I've been rather interested in that trial, if you understand my drift." Estrada's neck turned a little crimson from the deep southern drawl, his lips tightened, and a quick quiver appeared on his left side. He knew what instance Gilchrist was referring about. A person seated in a chair in the corner shifted slightly. He didn't say anything, but Estrada observed the little movement. "Yeah, I'm confident we can finish this quickly for you, Mr. Gilchrist." He remarked this while shifting papers around in his briefcase. "Mr. Gilchrist, can we just get to the point? My parents want to gift you." Ryan cut him off with a fast hand move. His expression indicated that he was getting irritated enough. "Listen, this bank is caught between the major law person in this area and Texas, as Ryan put it. His huge law employer is responsible for some awful stuff. Some of the top people here spoke or acted inappropriately toward others. It's gotten out of control over the previous 3 years, and now it's all about to explode up. Plus, the government is searching your office for a large sum of money. One of those high-ranking officials was dispatched to remote secret banks. You did not keep your money-making and personal cash components separate, like other banks do, so you have too many checkers breathing down your neck. And then I come in seeking a peace because I can easily see the correlation, sir. My marriage is breaking down because your top people are not keeping an eye on her, and one of your top bosses." Ryan leaned back and offered Mr. Estrada a calm expression. Ryan remarked, "I can read, Mr. Estrada, and much everything I stated is in the news. The part that isn't is available for anybody to see in the legal paperwork on the bad behavior case, or in my own case." "Why are you looking so shocked? I'm aware of all of this." "Did I miss something, Mr. Estrada?" "Mr. Gilchrist, I believe you have set it out clearly." I, the guy in the corner, let out a grunt before sitting up. His face was in the dark, but he has now walked into the light. He stepped up to the table. "I'm Parker Winston," he said. Just like that. He did not extend out to shake hands. "I am from Chicago," he added. He left it at that. However, Ryan picked up on the fact that the company's main office was present. Ryan looked at the man from Chicago Estrada with curiosity. Winston spoke firmly. You just told our friends, Mr. Gilchrist and Mr. London, that we're in bigger difficulty than we can handle. Estrada appeared stunned. Leave, Winston snapped. Estrada and his friend, who was never introduced. After a minute, they hastily grabbed their belongings and went. Winston focused his sight on Ryan. He was a man accustomed to being in charge. He expected Ryan to look away shortly, but Ryan didn't. Winston finally started to speak, his voice calm. In 10 minutes, you can get out of here with a lot of cash, Winston suggested to Ryan. Drop your lawyer, let's keep things simple. Just us, and it will be completed sooner than you expect, he said. Ryan stared at him for a long time. Ryan addressed Mr. London without turning. Could you give us a second? London got up. He left his case, intending to return, and walked out, closing the door firmly. Winston took a seat at the head of the table, calm and assured of himself. So what does it take, Mr. Gilchrist? He flung out immediately. I want to solve this problem, and we're willing to pay to do so. Estrada believes you're a reckless guy, but you're clever enough to realize this bank can't take any more negative talk. We are quite aware that you have put us in a difficult situation. What amount do you want? Ryan stared at the man for a long time. By the way, Estrada performed. This individual was extremely significant in the bank's main office. He wished this difficulty would go away. I don't enjoy being overly greedy, Ryan added, but I want it to sting, enough so that your major bank learns a lesson. He pondered aloud. Winston's lips became even tighter. I want $4 million. Ryan spoke quietly all at once. And tax-free. That is, you pay the tax and I receive $4 million clear, he explained. Unless Congress changes the Small Business Job Protection Act of 1996 so that emotional stress cases are no longer charged, he added. Have they changed that today? And I missed it. Winston's eyes grew sharper. The man had not made a mistake by mentioning the full name of the statute or the abbreviation for intentional emotional harm. This simple contractor knows a lot. All things considered, Winston felt certain that this country person had to leave the bank's affairs alone now. Deal. Winston spoke. Ryan shook his head, raising his right hand. His small finger was buried in his palm. Don't agree so quickly, Parker, my man. You may not like all I desire. That was only the first part. That's in addition to paying my lawyer's expenses. Just so you know. Are there any concerns with that? Mr. Winston waited a while, looking Ryan in the eyes, attempting to predict his thoughts. He shakes his head. All right. Second, the bank must settle out of court with all 11 men and women who have complained about being mistreated in Dallas, without forcing them to go to court. Ryan stated that from your generous heart, you will give them $500,000 all at once, and it will not be taxed like mine is. You will also support their legal fees, Ryan said, raising his ring finger in the air to indicate he wasn't finished yet. Furthermore, if they leave or are fired, you will ask them back and reinstate them in their previous positions if they choose. They lost out on step-ups and roles. They'll be paid for the time they were gone, beginning when they left. Those who stayed should be compensated for the difference in pay between what they received and what they should have received with the promotions they were denied due to unfair treatment. You will return any unfavorable work reports from that time or shortly thereafter. If the bank made negative remarks about any of the 11 who left, you will retract that statement and apologize to their new employers for the misunderstanding. Ryan continued, folding his ring finger. Third, you will pay Mrs. Sharon Michaels the equivalent of 10 years of her husband's salary, plus any other money he would have received if he had not been charged with fraud and money laundering. As we previously discussed, this will also be a one-time contribution that is tax-free. Fourth, the bank CEO will apologize to Mr. Winston, me, and everyone else for the pain caused by your team's failure to manage things properly. Fifth, in return, Mr. Winston, we will not go to court over what transpired previously, and we will remain silent regarding any deal or apology statements. Ryan's hand was a tight ball. He then let it rest comfortably on the table. Winston did not say anything. I've been keeping an eye on Ryan. He was dissatisfied with what was being laid out. Come on, big city money man, Ryan taunted with a cold smirk on his face. You and I both know that the money I receive for the harm done will not be insignificant, Ryan stated. I have a clever lawyer. Say no, and I could earn 20 or 30 million, possibly more, and no one is going to reverse that decision later. I looked at the results of the last 50 such situations. Only one did not stick because it was not properly filled out. You're also responsible for paying your lawyers. You could drag this out, but just having your lawyers show up will cost you a lot of money. You can avoid all that bother. Don't miss this opportunity, buddy. Winston sat quietly, contemplating his next move. Ryan was making fun of him, and he knew he had the bank's attention, but he hesitated, waiting for a break. Mr. Winston, how much will the nasty comments hurt each day when mine and their trials make the news? Ryan murmured softly, leaning forward. Ryan, my lawyer, almost whispered. We'll speak to the press every day, straight after court. Trust me. Parker. Winston looked at Ryan with piercing eyes, but Ryan was unconcerned. Okay. Winston ultimately admitted he didn't look happy, but he appeared to give in. Winston said, Let's bring London back. You tell him what he needs to know and he can complete the paperwork. We need to persuade people who claim they were mistreated to agree, but I believe they will say yes quickly. Estrada will call them in Dallas after we finish here. We should contact them before going to court. I'll notify Estrada and the superiors to approve your arrangement immediately away. All money will be sent no later than 10 days after signing. The same applies to individuals who have been treated. Bad bargain. Ryan halted and looked deeply into Winston's eyes. He nodded. I'm going to get $500,000, Consuela inquired, amazed. Yes, Ryan stated. Her face showed. She could not believe it. And extra for my lost wages, right? She added. Ryan nodded. Cool, right? He said. Consuela nodded, still in amazement. She looked around the modest house she wouldn't have to live in anymore. She was at a loss for words. What should we do now? She asked. Ryan muttered, thinking he had taken Belinda's arms from his neck for a moment. She was gripping on tightly, making it difficult for him to breathe. It had been a long time since Ryan and Consuela felt safe enough to meet, and Belinda was worried he would leave again. Ryan recommended we go to the cafe for dinner. Consuela. His eyes grew huge. She realized it was a big deal to be spotted out together. It wasn't unsafe anymore to be together. She grinned widely. Yay! Belinda burst out singing. Belinda's patience nearly ran out, moving her car seat from her mother's car to the large truck, but it was quickly finished and they were off. The ride was full of enjoyment. As the three entered the cafe, the staff was taken aback. This was more than simply a short hello over breakfast. Ryan and Consuela hadn't eaten breakfast there in a long time, but seeing how happy and close the three were, even the hesitant ones began to smile back at them. Ryan was greeted warmly, and several couples and families came over to say hello to Consuela and get to know him. Everyone said they should come back again. They returned home just as the clock struck 12. Dinner and ice cream at Baskin-Robbins. Finally, a movie for Belinda transformed the night into a lengthy, happy moment. Nobody was ready for it to stop. Belinda, exhausted, fell asleep on the journey home and made just a small noise when Ryan pulled her from the car seat to take her inside. Consuela made Belinda comfortable in bed, removing her shoes and covered her up as Ryan watched lovingly. Ryan stepped aside, allowing Consuela to exit the room. She closed the door and looked at Ryan, who was still smiling and without saying anything, let go of the doorknob. She stepped closer to Ryan, wrapping her arms around his neck and lowering his head for a passionate kiss. The transition was rapid and easy. Ryan did not even try to take a step back. Not that he wants to. His hands grabbed her waist and drew her closer to him. They took a break from kissing before restarting. This was not their first kiss, but it felt significant to both of them. I've desired that for a long time, Ryan explained after a breather. Consuela simply smiled back. I agree, she said. She reached up and touched his face, running her fingertips along his jaw. Ryan took her hand and tenderly kissed each finger. This was not what we had intended, she said softly and low. Ryan gazed at her, inquisitive but silent. We planned to help each other out in court. Consuela let out. I was about to mention that Shawn hit on me, and you'd claim he pursued your wife to help us both win. She waited for another kiss. This time we planned to get back at them in the bank. She muttered, next. Ryan led the kiss this time. We did it. Consuela spoke after a pause. "We did exactly what we wanted and escaped unscathed, and you were like a shield the entire time, ensuring they never caught on to me." Ryan shifted. He knew Consuela was tough. He didn't think she noticed his protective actions or caring. "Silly man," she murmured, noticing his uncertainty. "I saw what you accomplished and realized it was for Belinda and me. Didn't you think I would notice that?" she asked quietly. Ryan was at a loss for words, so he remained quiet. She amazed at how powerful she had been all along. "So kind to me and my girlfriend. Did you think I'd miss Belinda's growing feelings for you? How could I not love her?" Ryan spoke in a quiet tone. "She is a part of you, and I am madly in love with you. Did not you see?" he whispered softly. "Didn't you realize what was going on with me?" She nodded and rested her head on his chest for a moment. Hear his heartbeat. "You know I love you in that way as well?" she inquired after a peaceful, relaxed pause. She leaned back to stare into his eyes. Ryan shook his head slowly. "I just hoped," he whispered quietly. He leaned in and kissed her again. Stronger this time. His tongue glided between her lips, preparing to play. Their bodies pressed closer in a rush. Consuela pulled back, looking at the man she loved, who also loved her. With a gentle grin, she took his hand and led him into her chamber. "Darling," she whispered, "I can't take too much of that." Consuela gave a quiet sound as he moved into her. She grabbed his arms and drew him close. She locked her feet behind him and drew him deeper. Ryan then moved away from Consuela and laid down next to her. It took some time before their heartbeats cooled down and they could breathe normally again. Ryan asked in a comfortable tone, "Do you think you'd want me to stay? Do you think we're a good match?" Consuela caressed his arm and gazed at him. They exchanged a breath without much passion. They kissed lightly. Consuela uttered a sound of contentment. "You will be unable to leave me." Ryan gave a quiet laugh. They remained silent for a while. She quietly said, "In a while, when you can I be on top?" She laughed softly. Ryan said quietly, "I'm ready, wherever you are." They did not say anything after that. Shawn Michaels and Carrie Gilchrist's court cases moved quickly. The U.S. lawyer did not have a lot of evidence, but what he did have was strong and very awful for them. The first to speak were banking professionals, who highlighted how opening accounts in other countries typically meant hiding money that should be taxed in the United States, or sending bad money out of reach. A woman dressed seriously from the State Department stated that none of the accounts where the money was sent had any funds remaining. The governments of the Caribbean countries had agreed to disclose only this much. This was typical for the places she named. Special Agent Williams told the court that when he and his partner apprehended Michaels, they discovered a laptop from the bank. They accepted it and stamped it as proof. Yes, the tag showed that, and it had his personal stamp. A tech expert told the court that the laptop had a lot of software on it. One was a customized program that the bank used to connect to its server from afar. He demonstrated how it worked and gave images of the initial pages, where you enter your name and secret phrase. A phone company representative displayed the call list for the phone held by Ryan and Carrie Gilchrist. They mentioned moments when the line was congested for roughly 21 to 23 minutes. The lawyer wrote the times and dates on a large whiteboard in the room. "No," he replied, "the Gilchrists did not have a wireless network." Then someone from the cable company informed everyone that the modem was only connected to the large Dell PC in the home office. No other cable outlets in the house were configured for modem use. Furthermore, their data indicated that the modem was only used for minor network checks during the hours specified on the whiteboard. The bank's IT boss then indicated that Mr. Michaels' username and code were used to gain access to some large accounts that he managed, money moves, and others say it continues when the laptop user leaves during specified hours. Yes, those were the exact times written on the whiteboard. Cash from some accounts was transferred to IP addresses of banks located far away. The defense disagreed, claiming that the IT boss could not be certain of that. He wasn't particularly familiar with such situations. The IT chief was irritated. He claimed he could find an IP address as easily as anyone else, and what he told the court was the full truth. The judge let his word stand. Next, a Treasury Department official said the same thing. He told the court that he frequently creates lists of bank IP addresses to monitor, and the ones in question closely matched the offshore banks they were discussing. The defenders remained quiet. They had no questions for him when it came time for the prosecution to finish up. The defense was forced into a corner. They attempted to establish that no one observed Shawn Michaels enter the transfer data. They stated that it may have been Carrie Gilchrist or someone else. Gilchrist Place had no security. Anyone may have been present, who knows. However, they had to reveal Shawn and Carrie had an affair. It was out there. Initially, they both stated this in video statements. There's no point hiding it. The television show that aired their story was a success. Clips were all over local television. The network even told the prosecutor it was a must-see every time it aired. The defense attempted to raise concerns. They debated aloud whether it made sense for two lovers sneaking around to pause for computer work. Mr. Michaels and Mrs. Gilchrist may have done their shady financial transactions from the office. The defense suggested, why visit the Gilchrist house? The prosecution declined to pursue this. They did not have to explain why the couple chose the Gilchrist house for their project. The facts were obvious as day. The evidence against him was too strong. Even if they were unable to show the money. Went to an account that he or someone else had set up. It did not matter. It didn't matter that they couldn't prove they had spent any of the stolen funds. Everyone assumed they hadn't got a chance to fight back yet. The prosecution brought in an FBI expert from Quantico, Virginia. According to this expert, all of the fingerprints in the house belonged to those who were supposed to be there. There were no traces that doors or windows had been smashed into, and no marks indicated that someone had waited to sneak in. In summary, no one else was present but the house owners, their friends, and Mr. Michael. Finally, Michaels was proven to be at fault for everything. He broke down and wept out at the table. He was a mess when Bexar County officials escorted him to jail to await his punishment. Carrie was savvy with the cops from the start, and she always claimed she didn't know Michael's bank login information. Even when Michael's lawyer sought to prove that Carrie knew about and used Michael's account information, she refused to change her narrative. This may have saved her out of more serious difficulties as a result of Michael's poor behavior. Carrie's lone mistake was being caught in a little fib by someone asking her questions a month after it all began. It was a stupid error to make. She lied about a minor detail, and they added the charge of lying at the last minute to round out the list. The jurors believed Carrie was involved in the deception, but there was no evidence that she knew it was happening. They did prove she lied, and she was convicted guilty solely on that basis. The decision on her guilt was made quickly during the hearing. The jury simply asked the judge to let Michaels serve his terms concurrently. The judge agreed and assigned him to a 20-year position that had yet to be determined. Carrie received a year. Michaels moved sadly toward the cell doors. He passed Ryan close enough to speak. Then a bailiff became distracted by a reporter and slipped behind. For a brief while, Michaels had only one guard on his other side. Ryan leaned in. "That's what you get for being with another man's wife," he added quietly. Only Michaels listened. Michaels took a few more steps before freezing as the words hit him. He turned to face Ryan, eyes wide and crazy. The bailiff tried to catch up, but it was too late. Michaels made a move towards Ryan. The bailiff pushed him back, but Michael began screaming loudly and angrily. He hauled the large bailiff across the floor. It took 4 cops to restrain him as he fought to get to Ryan. He was yelling and battling with them as they dragged him away. "Hello there, Agent Williams. How can I help you today?" Ryan was slightly surprised to find the FBI agent at his door, but not too much. He looked around to check whether there were any other agents with him. It was just Williams in the corridor. "Please come in," Ryan requested. "Is it okay if I lock the door to his secretary? Gone for the day, he was locked up and didn't like the thought of someone sneaking up on him." "Sure," Williams replied, politely as always. "I just need to ask you a few questions, if that's okay." "Of course." "What do you need?" Ryan inquired, quick to respond. "Do you want some coffee?" The coffee pot in the next room was still half filled. Williams paused. He remembered the coffee from earlier. It was almost too much for him, yet he chose to say yes. He could handle it. "Thank you. I will." Williams grabbed the mug of dark coffee and clutched it securely. It appeared to be as strong as it had been previously. He took a cautious drink. It was quite hot. He took another sip. Mr. Gilchrist, I'm here to discuss something you said to Mr. Michaels, his lawyer informed us. Oh, Ryan responded, shocked and contemplative, as he waited for Williams to continue. Michaels believes you told him at his trial that you were responsible for everything that happened. Williams paid close attention to Ryan. I'm waiting for his response for a bit. Ryan demonstrated nothing. Williams believed, not for the first time, that Ryan would be a good poker player. Ryan raised his eyebrows. Is this all? What did he ask? Yes, sir, that's the important point, Williams responded. Ryan offered a scarf. No way. First and foremost, I never spoke to him during his trial. I wasn't near the person, but when he went by me during his sentencing, I said something like, "That's what you get for sleeping with my wife." That is all I said. He lost it, and they had to take him away. It was the last time I saw him. Could you please explain what you meant by it, Mr. Gilchrist? Explain. Ryan appeared puzzled. The bit about him being sentenced was appropriate given his relationship with your wife. Well, I am not sure what you are asking. It seems clear to me. I'm not thrilled with the guy, and I believe it's excellent that he'll be in jail. What comes around, goes around, right? Exactly. I thought it was interesting that he got 20 years for something he did while sneaking around with my wife. Does that make things clearer? Ryan's eyes were slightly angry. He was holding back. I see, William remarked, moving his coffee cup from one hand to the other to take a sip. It was a simple strategy to give Ryan a time to settle down, so don't be surprised if Mr. Ryan huffed. He spoke with a scarf. Of course, I deny it, he said with more words. Williams gazed at Ryan while he drank. Ryan appeared angry, but he did not appear to be lying. Williams considered asking Ryan to take a lie detector exam, but he knew Ryan would refuse because he was too upset, and it would not establish anything other than Ryan's anger. All right. William rose swiftly. Thank you for speaking with me, Mr. Gilchrist. We'll call you if we need more, okay? He sought for a place to put his mug. Ryan is still visibly furious, but tries to hide it. Took William's mug and set it on a little table near his desk. He stated that he will be out of the office for a few weeks. Mr. Gilchrist, where will you go? Williams asked without thinking. Ryan's eyes grew sharper. Why would you want to know, Special Agent Williams? He inquired, his voice rising. They told I shouldn't leave town. They were still looking at things, but this was months ago. The court work is completed. 2 people are in jail, and it's all over, correct? Are you looking into me, Agent Williams? No, sir, William just stated, I. Are you telling me that I have to stay where you can find me at all times? No, sir. William said you didn't have to. You're correct. Our team is currently not conducting a large-scale search. The Treasury and State Department are still looking for the money in the Caribbean, but they aren't finding anything. And that is all that is happening. Ryan gazed intently at the FBI agent. He took a deep breath in and held it. Then his jaw tightened before loosening. He let his air out. Okay, I'm taking a vacation because I've been getting upset too easily, even over minor issues. I need some time to relax, you know? It's been a difficult year. I apologize if I was disrespectful. Okay. No, not at all. Williams was quick to let Ryan know he got it. Truly, the man had a wife who cheated, was caught on a TV show, and saw his wife with someone else. The courtroom thing. Yeah. Williams could understand why he could be stressed. Actually, you can reach me, Ryan answered, warming up a little. I will not be using my phone much, but I will check it. You have the number, correct? I'm not sure where I will be. Maybe I'll head to my cabin in Marble Falls. Or you could just drive. Maybe go to the Grand Canyon or something. I simply need to get away. Do you know? I understand, Agent Williams remarked, caring for the guy. They talked a little more. Then Ryan escorted the FBI agent out and locked the door. Williams was starting his automobile when he suddenly became concerned. Shit, he exclaimed loudly. He peered up at the building from the windows of Gilchrist's office. Did Gilchrist lure him into discussing the missing money case? He wasn't sure, but Gilchrist had made him feel sorry for himself and steered the conversation away from unsafe themes. He started his automobile. He shook his head, still staring at the windows. Was Gilchrist so clever? A slight uncertainty crept into his thoughts for no apparent cause. He had a strange feeling. The case was cold, but Agent Williams chose to go with his gut feeling. He would keep an eye out for anything unusual about that thought. He started the car and drove into the evening traffic. After the FBI agent left, Ryan stood motionless by the door. My hands were shaky and my heart was racing. It took some time before he could hear anything over his rapid heartbeat. To disguise his anxiety, he had allowed rage to swell. The anger was genuine, but it was directed at himself for being terrified, not the agent or the scenario. Nonetheless, it appeared to be effective. When he felt calm, he returned to his desk to sign the final stack of papers. His assistant would be expecting them first thing tomorrow. Signing these papers was his penultimate chore before his planned break, which he had discussed with the agent. Having the agent drop by worked out well for Ryan. It revealed the FBI's limited knowledge. If Agent Williams had solid proof, he would have filed a search warrant. But he did not. That means the cops didn't have enough evidence to persuade a judge. It was a relief. The sole search warrant they obtained was for his house, which made sense given where the horrible stuff occurred. They handed him his home back months ago. Furthermore, Consuela had not received any updates on the case. It seems that the cops had no idea she was involved. He hoped they'd start to relax a little, not much, just a bit. He was eager to see Consuela and Belinda more. She adores Consuela. Told her child, "Mama has to talk to Ryan right now. Ryan will look at your artwork soon." Belinda wasn't happy. She wanted Ryan to see the drawing of her mother and Ryan immediately away. It was quite significant to her. She went into the kitchen, climbed into her chair, and applied additional color to the people in her photograph. She soon forgot that her mother had urged her to wait. "So, you suppose he had no idea?" Consuela asked Ryan. "Nope. He was only guessing," Ryan said, feeling at ease. "If they truly believed they had something, they would show up at my office, home, vehicle, all of my work sites, and even the Marble Falls location with search warrants. He has nothing, and I don't see how he can gather enough evidence for a search anyplace. He even stated that the major inquiry was conducted in San Antonio. Some things are still being investigated far away," he explained, but it appeared to be a dead end. He simply wanted to know what I said to Michaels on the court. I informed him, and that was all. "Okay, that's fine," Consuela said gently, then perked up. She had been tense in recent months. She often regretted she hadn't rushed into their idea. The plan succeeded, but the possibility of a surprise knock kept her on edge. Today, that terror seemed far away. She relaxed and lifted her face to receive a kiss from her love. "But Mom," Belinda implored Consuela, "all of my buddies will be there." The little girl had recently turned 5, 2 months ago. She was about to cry when Ryan walked in. This was his 5th day here. He stopped pretending he was staying somewhere. He was next door, helping an elderly lady. She almost fell while attempting to mount her porch steps. Ryan ran over to rescue her when he saw her struggle, leaving Consuela at the front door. "Oh," he said, observing the gloomy expressions. "What happened?" "This is her school," Consuela said, looking concerned. "They have a father-daughter day tomorrow, and you know she doesn't get it." Ryan nodded. He understood. He was now feeling sad, just like them. He knew Consuela had left Belinda's father 4 years ago, just after the baby was born. She returned here with her young one. The father attempted to communicate initially, but there were no calls, letters, or visits for more than 3.5 years. Ryan looked outside, pretending to listen to a dog barking. He had a plan but was hesitant to execute it. Belinda was very sad, and it felt wrong. He did not like it. After making up his mind, he returned outside and circled the house to where his car was parked. He opened the passenger door and retrieved a tiny package from behind the seat. He checked it, made sure everything inside was fine, and then returned it inside. Consuela and Belinda stood outside the back door, puzzled as to why he had departed without saying anything. Both were concerned. "What?" Consuela started to ask. Ryan grinned in an unreadable way and took her hand, gently leading her into the living room. He sat on the couch, tapping the seat. Next to him. "Honey, what up?" Consuela inquired, curious about Ryan's peculiar behavior. Ryan cleared his throat, wishing he'd grabbed a beverage earlier, but it was too late. "I mean, we've gone through a lot since we first met at that cafe for breakfast." He started fumbling over his words. "I haven't been good at asking what you think we should do next, or even whether you want to. I mean, I didn't usually ask how you were feeling. We seem to move from one thing to the next with little conversation. But I hope it is clear that if you do not want to try something new, I will not force you, right?" Ryan, you've never forced me into anything. Consuela told me I wouldn't do anything I didn't want to. I would not let you, she continued, assuring him. Yeah, I know, Ryan said. I've relied on that. But now he shifted, coming closer and looked at her more directly. Now I have a question for you, because we both need to know where we stand before proceeding with the next stage. He grabbed for her hand again and let go. He fumbled behind him on the sofa. Consuela looked at him, feeling impatient. Then her eyes widened. She moved her hand away from her mouth and covered it with both fists. Oh my God, she gasped. Consuela? Ryan replied, his voice deep. Over the last 2 months, I've discovered that I love you more than I can express. I want you to be. I mean, Will, could you possibly be? Yes. Consuela responded by whispering back. Ryan glanced at her at a loss for words. He had planned for a lengthier, more professional speech, possibly even needing to persuade her a little. He struggled to get adjusted to things quickly. Will you? I mean, he murmured. Just to double check, did he hear correctly? Consuela nodded. Tears began to gather in her eyes. Ryan reached for the small box with his left hand and held it in front of him. He opened the box clumsily and removed the diamond ring. It had looked good in the shop. The stone was large, he thought, but now he had reservations. Perhaps he should have chosen differently. He drew a big breath of bravery, took Consuela in his left hand, and began to place the ring on her finger. Consuela began to cry hard as the ring was placed, feeling unsure. Ryan hugged and patted her back. He didn't understand why, but she didn't push him away. That must be okay, he reasoned. He wasn't sure, though. Mommy, why are you so sad? Belinda asked. She had just shown up on Consuela's side. She looked like she was about to cry. Belinda went to her room to play when it appeared like her mother and Ryan were going to sit and talk. She came back when she heard her mother weep. Consuela turned to her, still in tears. She lifted her daughter onto her lap. See what Ryan handed me? Consuela showed her the white gold ring with a large stone. Isn't it neat? Belinda replied, unsure. Why did Ryan give you that? Because we're getting married, sweetheart. Consuela stated this while kissing her. Cool, right? Belinda paused for a second. So what does married mean? Consuela giggled and hugged her daughter tight. This means that you, Ryan, and I will now live together. You okay with that? Belinda got it. She started grinning. Does this imply Ryan won't have to depart at night? She inquired cheerfully. Ryan and Consuela developed a routine in which Ryan would stay the night. I awoke really early. I had a quiet bath, put on new clothing, based on what he kept at Consuela, that place, and then fell asleep on the living room couch. When Belinda awoke, it appeared that Ryan had just arrived, ready to start the day with her and her mother. Consuela shook her head at Belinda's question. Never again. She remarked, Our home will be his home, which Belinda gladly accepted. She paused for a moment, glancing at her mother. But why were you crying, Mommy? She asked again. Because I'm quite delighted. Consuela replied, smiling at her. Belinda considered the answer. I'm not going to cry when I'm happy, she added, almost upset. I chuckle when I'm happy, she explained. She began to get up from her mother's lap. Ryan stopped her. Belinda? Ryan spoke gently. The 5-year-old gazed at him. There is more. What? She asked. Well, if I marry your mother, I will be. He let the words hang and gazed at Consuela. He lifted his brows and inquired without words. Consuela nodded, tears in her eyes again. What? Belinda wanted to know. Kids dislike waiting. Ryan took a big breath. That means I'm going to be your father. He spoke slowly. He continued. If that's okay with you. Belinda gave him a serious look. Her eyes grew incredibly large. She looked back to her mother to be sure. Really? She said again, her gaze returning to Ryan. You'll be my father. She was so sweet. Ryan simply nodded. Suddenly he struggled to speak. He cleared his throat. If you want me to be, he said after a while. The child didn't take long to decide. I do. Little Belinda spoke. She extended her arms and leaned toward him. Ryan embraced his stepdaughter for the first time. He packed her head and she gazed up with a spontaneous grin. She dropped to her knees and held him tightly. Ryan was once again speechless. The lump in his throat remained for a while. When it was time for bed, Consuela informed Belinda that she now had a father for Father's Day tomorrow. Belinda's eyes widened. She had forgotten. It took her about an hour to settle down for sleep. Next morning, Belinda dashed to her mother's room. Consuela and Ryan had spent the night together, straying from their customary routine. Belinda did not mind. Tommy, Maria, and Lisa from kindergarten reported that their parents also sleep in the same bed. Ryan was about to inquire why, but Consuela nudged him. Later, he was pleased he didn't ask. Perhaps it was better not to know. Belinda was too excited to eat a full breakfast. She played with her cereal but drank all of her milk. She then hurried down the sidewalk to Ryan's truck. At school, she clutched Ryan's hand. She showed him off, presenting him to every one of her tiny friends and teachers. "This is my new daddy," she stated proudly. "I don't know where to begin, Ryan. I think I just want to thank you for being here," Carrie said, unsure. They were sitting at a tiny table beneath a large pecan tree. The prison camp has a pleasant grassy area for visitors between the main building and one of the convicts' dormitories. Ryan spoke in a calm tone. "Your lawyer wanted me to personally present you the divorce papers," he said. He tried not to let his unpleasant feelings show. This might be the final time he saw his now ex-wife, Carrie. Her only requirement had been that he personally deliver the documents. She had not contacted him after that night. She and Shawn Michaels got into trouble in the club, even after she was charged. She didn't speak to him. Ryan had wanted it that way, but was surprised. She had made no attempt to contact anyone. Ryan said, "Now I realize I can't do what you wanted. The restrictions here state that I cannot bring in any documentation or anything other than what I am wearing," he explained. "Yes, I found out about it after I arrived," Carrie said, "and they told me you had a special permission to merely leave it with the staff rather than delivering it by mail as the rules require. I'm grateful for that. I really am." Ryan simply shrugged. What Carrie was thankful for was no longer important to him. She'd hurt him too much, and he'd moved on. He gazed around the visitor area. Ryan Women's Federal Prison Camp was a facility with minimum security. It did not have high fences or barbed wire. He expected. The only thing that distinguished it from the surrounding region was a standard chain-link fence, like those found in any neighborhood. The buildings were beige with red roofs, similar to those in the Southwest. The grass was green and luscious. Trees were tall, providing plenty of shade. Everything was neat. Ryan could not see any trash or debris from the outside. The atmosphere felt pleasant and easygoing. He pondered what it felt like to be inside. So Ryan and Carrie had their final conversation in this tranquil place. Each was engrossed in their thoughts about the past and their now separate futures. "What should we do now?" Carrie inquired softly. She sat upright, hands in her lap. According to the rules, she could only give Ryan a short hug. She knew Ryan wouldn't appreciate that rule, so they just said hello quietly. Carrie felt the jail staff's eyes on her. Ryan looked at Carrie again and replied, "There's nothing to do. There is no longer a us. That is what divorce implies." Carrie looked down. She felt sad but not broken. She saw it coming. "Ryan, I really apologize for causing problems for us. What I did was wrong, and I apologize. I did not intend to hurt you. I hope you will believe me. I never intended to hurt you." Ryan just moved a little. He repaired his sunglasses. The sun shone brightly through the white walls, hitting his eyes. "I don't understand it, Carrie," Ron remarked. "How could you think being with your boss wouldn't harm me?" Carrie's face tightened. She bit her lip a little. "You weren't supposed to find out, Ryan. I realize that seems foolish now, but I assumed if you didn't know, she had stopped trying to find the proper words. No harm, no foul." Ryan was helpful. Carrie paused for a bit before nodding softly. She didn't like the words, but they conveyed how she felt before Ryan let out a soft giggle. He turned to face Carrie for the first time. He felt as if he didn't recognize her in her spotless jail clothing. She appeared different to him. He couldn't remember seeing her clothes so clearly before. Her face was thinner than he remembered. The light dots on her nose popped out more. Her green eyes seemed too wide for her face. Her light hair, trimmed even shorter than before, hung dreary. He noticed her petite figure slumped as if she was carrying a big weight. She was a stranger. A stranger had hurt him. "You were still wrong, Carrie," he said, sharply aware or not. Ryan hesitated and closed his eyes. He attempted to control his breathing. This wasn't going anywhere. "Sorry. I'm not sure why I try," he said afterward. "It bothers me when people claim, 'What you don't know won't hurt you.' It causes harm. It's simply not felt yet." "I understand," Carrie remarked gently. I didn't notice it then, but I do now. Ryan shrugged. Too late, Carrie, he said. There was no warmth in his voice. Carrie's face twinkled. Yes, you are correct, she said low. I can't reverse my mistake, hun, Ryan, but I'm paying dearly now. I will not do that again, I vow. Ryan shakes his head. No, you're paying the price for lying to a federal agent, not for disrupting our life, and Sharon Michaels hasn't even started. Ryan turned, ready to rise and talk. Divorce. That's only paperwork. That is it. It is not a penalty. You broke us. I only had a judge market official, nothing else. There was no warmth in his expression. Carrie looked at him, heartbroken eyes practically spilling. I know, Ryan. I do. I made a terrible mistake and can't fix it, she added quietly, pushing back tears. Ryan's shoulders raised and fell. Life is all about choices, Carrie. You chose incorrectly. You now live with them. He spoke in a neutral tone. There is no fault. Is there any chance for us after Carrie starts? Ryan shook his head firmly. He took off his shades and placed them lightly on the table. I do not want to appear rude or cruel, he began slowly. It's unnecessary and wasteful. Look, Carrie, I'm getting married next week. Carrie was hurt hard by this. It never occurred to her that Ryan would move on so swiftly. I'm not sure what to say, she managed to say. I wish you the best, she added. Tears were about to fall from her eyes. I didn't mean to drop it like that, Ryan explained. Kind of sorry. I considered sending you a note later. Oh, I was not sure. Carrie gathered herself after some stillness, a strength she had not known she possessed before. The harsh regulations here in jail were shaping her faster than she expected. I wish you well, and what is her name? She asked hesitantly. Consuela. Ryan filled in. Consuela. Robertson. Consuela. That's a pretty name. Carrie expressed no sourness in her tone. I sincerely wish you happiness. She attempted to grin. Ryan nodded in understanding as she looked bewildered. Do you know her? He said low. She worked at a bank. She was one among many who sued our boss for inappropriate behavior. My lawyer obtained information about them. Consuela and I met later, and that's how things proceeded, he explained. Ryan half expected this chat about his upcoming wedding to bring up his bride-to-be. Any words would inevitably include her name. His intended statements were not incorrect by any means. Yeah, they weren't entirely correct either. Carrie watched Ryan for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she replied, I hope you two are happy. I'm confident she will not harm you as I did. This time, she added some roughness to her voice. Ryan let it slide. Carrie had no right to be unhappy about his decisions anymore. He stood up but did not go away immediately. He said, I won't come back here. Consuela and I, well, you know. Carrie nodded. So goodbye, Carrie, he said. I hope everything goes well once you're out of here. Thank you, Ryan. That means a lot, Carrie responded, standing up but remaining on her side of the table. Ryan nodded before turning to leave. Then he came to a halt and waited before returning his gaze to Carrie. Carrie, there's something I don't understand. You are under no obligation to inform me if you do not wish to. But why? Why choose that individual in the first place? Carrie suspected that this would be one of Ryan's first questions. She had planned to be cautious with her response, but she suddenly saw no need. Ryan had made it apparent they were done for good, yet she waited for a moment before speaking. I didn't mean to cheat, she stated honestly. I was pleased. Things appeared to be returning to normal after the initial incident. She gazed at her ex-husband, feeling guilty. They hadn't mentioned that this was her second time stepping out on him. I was all in on us for a while, she said. Then I had a big jump at the bank, followed by some victories. There's more to do. And the benefits that came with it. Ryan, liked being the boss, and I saw a path to the top dogs in management. She flung her hands up and made a face. It was really horrible. But I saw Shawn Michaels could assist me up, so I let him. He paid me nearly as much as you. You see, Ryan, he was not a decent man. I've never loved him. In reality, he was quite awful. According to what I've read, when people cheat, they frequently choose someone worse than themselves. It helps them feel better. I suppose that's what I did. Being around him made me feel unique. Ryan, she said exhaustedly, I assumed we had our own little world. That was fantastic. I felt more confident in myself, even though it was not true. I wasn't happy. I can't make excuses, Ryan. I got caught up in seeking more at work and enjoying the attention from others. I believe I lost my path. I'm truly sorry. Ryan needed a time to consider her remarks. He was nice with his query, and people informed me about what you said about me and our life. He asked. He couldn't admit that he already knew some things from secretly filming her. Carrie got taken off guard. She had not expected this. I may feel guilty after thinking she spoke. She eventually spoke. At first, I felt bad about what I was doing. I guess I started arguing with you to keep going. Later, I didn't feel as bad about making it sound like your fault, you know? I started seeing things differently. Every time you were upset or disagreed with me, whether in real life or in my head, ... It was another cause to view things negatively. It was simple to pretend that I was the one who had been wronged. I began to see you as impeding my progress, forcing me to become someone I am not. I knew you still didn't trust me after my first mistake, which made me feel imprisoned. I assumed you were trying to hold me back. Then, in my mind, what I did didn't seem as horrible. I mean, if I made it appear like you were the wrong person, how could I be blamed? Right? That thought helped me feel less awful about doing things I shouldn't have done. It was a need for me. I couldn't stop. I felt compelled to keep on no matter what. I don't know what more to say, Ryan. It was wrong, but I was so confused back then, like strolling through thick fog, and I couldn't find a way out. I did not want to put my spouse second, but I was not thinking clearly. I did it, and I feel terrible. Ryan glanced at her for a bit more before shaking his head. He said, "You've changed so many aspects of our story. According to what I've discovered, numerous of our prior acquaintances told me that what you said was really cruel." His face was filled with grief, and all because you were willing to betray yourself in order to acquire more. Carrie could not believe it. "I would never." "Yeah, you did," Ryan reacted angrily. "Hookers sleep with others for money. You did it with Michaels, who knows who else. You wanted more. It's all the same, but with people who dress better." Ryan's voice was filled with contempt and repressed wrath. "My wife, the sellout," he muttered, his heart hurting. "I am done." He went away quickly, seeking for the nearest exit. He did not turn back. During the dead of night, Carrie awoke with a start. "You're a jerk," she yelled out. She created a link in her dream that she had not seen while awake. Carrie realized right once that Ryan's new gal had previously worked for Shawn Michaels, when he informed Consuela his full name. However, she did not give it much thought at the time. It took her this long to remember. Consuela knows how to hack into bank accounts. Everyone accused Shawn for doing these things while she was sleeping. Carrie's thoughts connected that information to what her lawyer had informed her several weeks before. Shawn Michaels had blamed Ryan for the mess, and his lawyer had pushed for a fresh trial using this new evidence, but the court had immediately said no. Her piercing shouts woke up the entire dormitory. Others got up and went to the restroom, and a guard approached Carrie's door. She was warned that she might be moved to a harder place. Falling back asleep was difficult. She wondered if her lawyer would come to Brian if she requested a meeting straight away. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope. However, that hope faded with the dawn. As she prepared, she experienced a strong sense of being stuck. Shawn's claims went nowhere. This would end the same way. Carrie knew her ex-husband too well. He wouldn't have dragged his new wife into it unless he knew it was going nowhere. He did it on purpose, knowing she would connect the connections. Ryan was sharp. He would have cleared his tracks. No one could figure out how he and Consuela did it, and nobody could prove it. She smirked. Ryan had stated that the divorce was not retaliation for her infidelity. It was only paperwork. This was his line. It was a shame that the TV show captured her and Ryan. It's only a detail. He claimed she saw it all. Now. No, this was her actual punishment, along with a year in jail. She had to face with the fact that he knew about her adultery, that he had set her up with Shawn, and that she was stuck. Carrie forced herself to stand and make her way to the dining room, biting her lips. She was doing yard work today and needed the energy. They planned to dig 3 fresh vegetable patches and a flower bed in front of the main building tonight. After eating, she'd mark out 319 days on her calendar, which was a month and a day after Ryan's divorce was finalized under Texas law. He married Consuela in the little town where she was born, and practically everyone in town attended the party, which was held in the local VFW hall. Ryan pondered when the wedding will take place and what they needed to do to prepare. Consuela informed him about her mother, and she had most of the information ready. They only needed a date. Seeing his shocked expression, she informed Ryan that she, her mother, and other family members had predicted he would ask. It was simply a matter of when. Ryan was taken aback by what he was putting himself into, but it didn't bother him for long. Consuela adored him, he loved her, and they both adored Belinda. It was all he needed. Still, he went to the local video store and rented Steel Magnolias. He had to know where to draw the line. Ryan and Consuela took their marriage certificate to a lawyer who specializes in this type of legal work 3 weeks after their wedding, and Ryan began to pursue adoption. Finding the girl's biological father was simple enough near Santa Fe, New Mexico. He had terrible times, as they say, and was more than willing to sign the papers for Belinda's adoption for $50 and 2 bottles of cheap wine, although neither money nor wine were visible in the video. Private eyes were created solely to ensure safety. 3 years later, they discovered Belinda's biological father dead in a dry creek bed that had been filled by a large storm the previous week. The local newspaper offered him merely 2 lines. Belinda did well with both parents. Ryan and Consuela were concerned because she had only ever known her mother. She was only 5 and couldn't say much, but it was obvious she enjoyed being cherished by 2 people. Rather than simply having 2 people instruct her what to do, she made good most of this opportunity. After Belinda had her new dad to herself for a year, Consuela felt she needed it. Consuela had the first of 3 more children. Jeanette, Rosita, and Roberto arrived one after the other, around 14, 16 months apart. Instead of being upset, Belinda viewed them as more family. She informed Trish at the diner that we were having another when Consuela Belli showed with Roberto. Trish was shocked and grinned broadly. Gary Gilchrist served her sentence calmly at the jail. Her stay was too short to allow her to travel halfway, thus she spent the entire 365 days at FPPC, Bryan, Texas. When she got out, she discovered Ryan had given her a lovely gift, half of the proceeds from selling their house contents inside, and some other items such as cars were hers in an account that made some money. She took the cash. She got a job at a beauty business in Fort Worth and got right into it. Her previous crime prevented her from returning to banking, although she didn't truly miss it for reasons she didn't fully understand. Carrie kept her misgivings about Consuela to herself. Years later, she realized it was her method of making amends for her previous life's mistakes. Shawn Michaels found prison life difficult. He didn't get along with the personnel, particularly the supervisors, and it showed after a few difficult months in a medium-security jail, confronting threats without guard assistance. Michaels changed. He behaved better. He was sent to a lower-security jail, then to an even lower-security one, where he spent the final 16 years of his life. He enjoyed teaching others mathematics, reading, and writing, finding happiness while also helping others. He advocated for the rights of inmates. Sharon Michaels supported him throughout the trial, primarily for the sake of appearances, but once he was imprisoned, she left him and returned to Colorado to be closer to her family. She eventually met a Colorado State Patrol trooper. They married after a lengthy, romantic relationship. She made him pledge that he would never cheat. Alternatively, he knew better than to stray, even after relocating to many cities for his FBI job. Agent Stan Williams couldn't ignore the idea that something about Ryan Gilchrist and the large bank swindle remained hidden. When he retired, he established a modest safety company in New York. Great-uncle Roberto Consuela, his uncle from Mexico City, was overjoyed when he learned they named their youngest child after him. He made as many visits as possible, bonding with Ryan, the newborn, and the other kids as well. The bank never received any of the $9 million paid to distant bank accounts. They finally stopped trying and focused on making more money. After 2 years, none of the former bank managers remained. Parker Winston became the major money guy until he retired to the Bahamas. Uncle Roberto's $7 million in Mexico never reached Ryan and Consuela in the north. They did not want or need it. After winning money from the bank, they had already repaid the bank and others who had harmed them, and they were unsure what to do with the big cash. Roberto took Gilchrist's suggestion and spent money on things he cared greatly about. 3 years after the United States closed the case, a small ship approached Venezuela's shore. Boats transported a large quantity of new weapons and supplies to assist a small number of fighters fighting the leader's troops. Months later, these fighters took over a city and began to use it as their base. Everything seemed to be going well for them. The CIA and other spy agencies did not discover who delivered the weapons, and they did not look very hard either. Consuela, Richard's cousin once removed, joined Ryan and joyously smashed the laptop they had. They fired the hard disk with large rifles till it split into fragments. They then buried these fragments deep in an old mine and blew it up merely for fun and to get rid of Richard's old explosives. Ryan and Consuela didn't feel horrible about taking the money. They did it more as retaliation for what had been done to them, and they felt it was justified. They were not satisfied with simply getting the two sacked from their employment. It was the jail term that mattered, and the bank trick was crucial in getting Shawn and Carrie locked up. Ryan and Consuela felt they should be grateful for Shawn and Carrie's existence. Jail was preferable to what would have occurred to cheating people 100 years ago in the same community. Ryan frequently stated back then that he would have had to shoot Shawn and Carrie for what they did. Ryan and Consuela needed the harsh repercussions for the cheats in order to move on. When their first child arrived, everything had become square. Ryan and Consuela bought over a nearby farm and relocated their family away from town. Ryan's small building buyers demolished the old structures and constructed their first large residence, made exactly like Consuela preferred, after she collaborated closely with a house designer. As the children grew older, the family would camp out in the wilds of the Llano Estacado throughout the summer. Ryan recounted the secret sights his grandfather had showed him. Belinda, their eldest, fell deeply for the high desert and went to college to study old Native American stories. She married a fellow student in the same subject, and they spent many hours alone on the broad plain. Ryan shed tears twice over Belinda. She first introduced him as her father to her little students. He controlled his composure well enough that just a few people noticed his watery eyes. He cried the second time when Belinda took him to meet her new newborn son in the hospital and told him he was named Ryan. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on